Welcome back, our ever-patient Irish Breakdown fans. That's Vince Adair. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we're back for another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, hence the topic, Irish Breakdown talks Notre Dame football. The topic we're going to start off at the beginning, Vince, and we're going to dive into here early on, and we'll see if some other topics pop up during the show. And then, of course, we'll have a mailbag at the end, so get your mailbag questions in. But to start off with, Vince, I think it's I look at it and say, you know, we've talked a lot about the fact that what's the standard for Notre Dame football, right? What is the golden standard?
Yeah.
And for me, the golden standard is competing for a championship. And the frustrating thing about Notre Dame is I feel like in several seasons in recent years, they've been close. They just haven't quite been able to get over the hump. And I would argue that over the last 10 years, there's been a championship caliber production or play or talent at every single position on the roster. It just hasn't put enough of it together at the same time. Because here's a reality that fans need to embrace. No team, including Alabama, or Georgia, or Ohio State, or 2019 LSU, or 2020 Bama, or 2018 Clemson, or whoever else is elite everywhere.
Right.
It's you got to get good enough at some key positions, and then you have to be elite at some key positions, then good enough at other positions, and have certain strengths. And Notre Dame just hasn't been able to put it all together.
Yeah,
they've had championship caliber offenses, but not defenses. They've had championship caliber defenses more often than not, but not championship caliber quarterbacks or offense. Quarterback being a big part of that. You know, like the 2015 team for me had a championship offense. Didn't have a championship coaching staff or championship defense, mainly because of the coaching staff. So we've kind of been here before, Vince. You know, I've made this claim. You take the 2018 Notre Dame team and you take any of the other playoff quarterbacks that were in that year and you put them on the Notre Dame team, and that team competes for championship.
Agreed.
Meaning can win one, not just get to the playoff.
Right.
So what do they got to do to put it all together, right? That's the question. I think that's the standard that Notre Dame is looking for when they go into next season. That's what they're hitting the portal for. You know, and we'll talk about this later, Vince, but, you know, I have a post on Irish Breakdown, the message board, Champions Lounge message board, where I talk about, you know, here's kind of what I'm looking for, right? Here's why Notre Dame is doing what they're doing. And it's to compete for championship. Why are they going after the guys they're going after in the portal, Vince? It's to compete for championship because deep down, not even deep down, just talking to sources around the program, this staff believes that this team is capable of making a run in 2023. They know they just need to make a couple minor tweaks, a couple guys to step up, but there's a belief that there's a foundation for that. And it's just refreshing that I'm not getting the normal January offseason talk from sources about, well, this year's a transition to the next year being the title team. And then there's some excuse why that team is not it. This team is saying, no, we're embracing this and we're making a run at it. So what we're going to do today is kind of go over, Vince, what they need to get there, because I just don't buy the whole, well, they're just not where they need to be. Look around college football, Vince. There's no 2018 Clemson college football right now. There's no 2019 LSU college football right now.
Absolutely.
There's no 2020 Alabama in college football right now. Notre Dame has a shot. They need to take their swing, and that's the reality of it.
Well, we had a discussion yesterday on IB Nation Sports Talk about where the defense is right now and what they've been doing and where they're at. And there was a conversation about, you know, they're giving up X amount of points, and at the end of the day, isn't that what it's about? Not giving up points on defense. And of course, that's the be all end all when it comes to defense.
Right? Exactly.
It's oversimplified, number one, and number two, if we're just talking about scoring averages, that puts them at the upper 30s in the country. That's not good enough, in my opinion.
Right. Not even close.
And that's not going to be good enough to win a national championship. And if that's your bar, if that's where you're setting your bar, you're not setting it high enough, in my opinion. That's not championship level bar setting. So you can't be happy yes, at the end of the day, you want the points to be down. No doubt. Should Notre Dame have scored more than 16 points against Stanford? Absolutely, they should have.
Sure.
No doubt. But at the same time, the defense needs
Right.
to be more consistent.
This team as a whole in 2022 wasn't good enough on either side of the ball to be a championship team. It
Agreed.
wasn't.
Oh, I agree.
And that's kind of the focus on is in 2023, what needs to change? What needs to happen? Where do the improvements need to be made? And that's what we'll dive into today.
Right.
And I think the first thing we need to talk about, Vince, is that I do want to talk about the defense and kind of talk about the offense last, because obviously that's the group that more often than not has been the not good enough group.
Right.
Right. And so for me, Vince, when I look at it, defensively, it's kind of been trending a little bit down since 2018. And I think that there's a lot of talk about how good Clark Lee's defenses were. I actually don't think Clark Lee's defenses were as good as people made them out to be. Notre Dame went through a stretch there in 19 and 20 where they didn't really play any offenses that were that good, to be honest with you. I thought in 2021 they actually played better offenses. And I've kind of talked about this in the past, Vince, is there have been years where, I mean, you've got to look at numbers in context, right? And just saying, well, hey, you allowed fewer points than this team allowed last year, whatever the case may be. That doesn't really tell us that this group was better, because it's like, look, what was the level of the competition that you played?
Yeah.
And I think those are things that kind of go into it. And I've talked about how like the efficiency numbers are important. And you look at last year, 2021's Notre Dame defense efficiency, they ranked 11th. Well, in 2020, the year that they were a college football playoff team, they ranked 24th in efficiency, because it takes into account, sort of the competition that you play. The 2019 defense was 6th, and the 2016 defense was, I'm looking for it here, and I actually thought this one was a little strange, because I thought this one was actually better. Let me find it here real quick. Couldn't do a search here. It was 20th, right? So you look at it and you say, like that year, for example, I thought that was a really great defense, but there were times where it just didn't play like a championship defense needed to play, but they were good at making the money plays. That's what was good about that 2018 defense. And you look at the 2022 defense, and it wasn't good at making those kind of plays.
No.
And so it wasn't where it needed to be. And honestly, and it just, the consistency of it was a lot like the offense has been for a lot of years. At times it looked really good, and at times it looked like, what are you doing here? Like, I don't even understand what we're seeing. And so just overall, I don't think the defense, from what we've seen in recent seasons, is more so in 2022 is the focus, was a championship caliber defense. It can't just say, hey, if the offense gets better next year, then Notre Dame wins a title because the defense was good enough. No, it needs to get better.
Yes.
It needs to get better, especially against, a team that can, be a little bit better at, by taking one thing away, you're not making yourself incredibly vulnerable to gash in the other way. And I think finding that is the big thing. But I think the first thing that I look at, Vince, when I look at the defense is, the run defense has just been underwhelming, and that's been an issue for years. The Notre Dame defense has never been where it needed to be. Well, let me rephrase that. The Notre Dame run defense has rarely been where it needs to be from a number standpoint to compete for a title. Now, I'll say this, Vince, and I know that people point to, like, you need to give up X number of yards per game and things like that, and like the 2020 defense was actually pretty good at giving up low amounts of yards, and the 2019 defense was not good at giving up yards. But I kind of look at it and say, but the competition was a little bit different. And the one thing for Notre Dame too is you've always got to take out Navy.
Sure.
When you're talking about it, because they're just such a funky team that it can skew things. But like, the consistency isn't there. Like even the 2020 defense, which statistically was close to where it needed to be, gave up 113 rushing yards per game. I've always argued that it was because the competition wasn't very good. They didn't really play any good teams, and that year off, all good offenses that year. That you get to the postseason and you give up 219 rushing yards to Clemson and 8.1 yards per carry. You give up only 140 rushing yards to Bama, but it was 5.6 yards per carry. And that's kind of always been the story. When the games are the biggest, the rush defense hasn't been good enough. And I think that's an area where you look at and say, boy, Notre Dame's going to have to get better in this area. There's
Well,
no
and
doubt.
the word that you use that jumps out to me when we talk about the run defense is consistency. I mean,
Mhm.
and that's the biggest thing. It always feels like when you've got a pass heavy team, Notre Dame forgets that they also have to stop the run in that game. And that's super frustrating. And how many times have we had a pregame show or shows leading up to a game where the other team has a mobile quarterback and everybody's just already throwing in the towel because Notre Dame hasn't done super well against mobile quarterbacks? Like all of these different aspects that can't be your calling card in a negative way. You know what I mean? Like you can't be a defense. It's like, well, we're going to shut down the passing game of a really good passing team, but we'll go ahead and give them the run game. Or, we'll just it's expected that we're going to give up yards to a mobile quarterback because that's just who we are. No, that doesn't have to be who you are. You can be good at shutting down the pass and shutting down the run at the same time. Like that's allowed. You are allowed to do that. And it's just they've been
The
so
the
inconsistent.
thing is, Vince, like when you're playing great teams, you're rarely going to shut down both. But I'm not saying you said that. What I'm saying is the problem that I have is like to take the USC game, for example, and the Ohio State game. They're very similar stories. The part of the reason Notre Dame couldn't stop Ohio or didn't stop Ohio or stopped Ohio State was Ohio State didn't figure out till the third quarter that they can actually run the football on Notre Dame. They
Yeah.
barely tried.
Yeah.
USC came out right away and said, okay, this is what they're doing defensively. They're out of their game plan. They're playing all these other fronts and looks, so we're just going to run at them. And guess what? Caleb Williams didn't have a huge offensive performance from a pass game standpoint, but USC ran all over Notre Dame. Same thing second half against Ohio State. They ran all over Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is in those moments this year, they would do things to take one aspect away and leave themselves completely vulnerable to the other. And that was to me a bit of a I mean, that was a problem for me. It really was a problem for me. And we saw that against Stanford. Like you couldn't stop you held them to under 100 yards passing or rushing, but you couldn't stop them in the pass game.
Yeah.
And then in other weeks, you're doing a good job of stopping the one aspect, but you can't stop the other aspect. You shut down BYU's pass game, but once BYU said, "Hey, let's try and run the football," they ran the football.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is so. I think that's where the NFL game and the college game are a lot different to me.
And that's a key right there, by the way.
You can NFL teams tend to be more one-dimensional from what I can tell studying statistics and from talking to people that follow the sport a lot more. You don't see a lot of they're either really good at running and not great at passing or really good at passing and not great at running. And that's not how the college game is. The best teams in college football are very balanced. And we're going to talk about this when we get to offense. And there's very few teams that win a national championship that can't do one or the other. Like LSU didn't have huge rushing numbers in 2019, Vince, but they could run it when they needed to run it. They could. Joe Burrow could run, but more so Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They could run when they needed to run. Alabama in 2020 was not a 200-yard per game rushing offense, but when they needed to run it, they could run it, and that's what makes it different than kind of the NFL. And so that's something that Al Golden's going to have to adapt to and adjust to in year two. Is doing a better job of saying, hey, we can be geared to stop this part of their team. That's their strength, but we can't do it by allowing them or allowing ourselves to be completely vulnerable to this other area.
Right.
And you can't say, well, get better players. I don't want to hear that. Right. Like that's always true, but go do your job. And that is to stop points. And I think it comes down to stopping a run. Like, what did we say about the South Carolina game? Yes, South Carolina is a really good throwing team, but you know what you needed to do? You needed to shut down the run game. Early on, they weren't doing that. Second half, they did that, and then all of a sudden, that leads to then more pressure on the quarterback, and then all of a sudden, their pass game stinks. And that's going to be a big key. If you can stop the run in college football, you've got a chance to be a really good football team, in my opinion.
And that's where I'm on the same page as Marcus Freeman. I mean, I know that's who he wants to be. He wants to run the ball and stop the run. But that's a recipe for success in college football. I mean, it's a very simplistic way to look at it, but it's not wrong. I mean, he's been in the college game his entire career, right? He knows what a successful defense and a successful offense looks like. He's not saying that that's all you focus on. I mean, he's not that he's not that, blinder central, right? That's not what he's saying, but he's saying you have to be good at those two things and then you can build off of from there. He's absolutely right. And sometimes it got to be a little at times on offense, and we're going to get to the offense, obviously, where it's like, man, you got to be able to throw the ball a little bit, but you have to be able to run the ball. You have to be able to stop the run, period, end of discussion. And so Notre Dame absolutely needs to do better on the defensive side of the ball, stopping the run if they want to be successful. And it even gets even more magnified when they get into the red zone. It's like, they're Oprah giving away touchdowns. You know what I'm saying? Like it's bad when they get in the red zone from a run and a pass standpoint, but even more so from a run standpoint.
But that's the thing, though, right? I think that those two things this year were a direct correlation.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame went through a stretch this year where their run defense was good statistically, but you and I could kind of point to and say, yeah, but that's partly because of who they played.
Sure.
They didn't play teams that were very good at running the football, and so yeah, you were able to just kind of overwhelm them. And then you get to the USC game, and lo and behold, guess what? You couldn't stop their run game,
right?
Even with their backup running back being their primary back because their starter was hurt. So those are the things that you look at, Vince. To me, I think another part of this, the run game production being better on the run defense is number one. I think it requires a bit more aggression and production, especially from the front. I mean, there are certain defenses that you don't need great tackle for loss numbers from your front, like Georgia's 3-4 defense. You don't need Jalen Carter to put up monster numbers for that defense to be really good.
Right.
It's just, because of the style of defense that they play, and so, Jalen Carter can be this phenomenally dominant player and have 7 tackles for loss this year. And that's it. But that's just not the nature of what Notre Dame does, right? That's a 3-4 2-gapping team. I think Notre Dame has to look at their personnel and say, we've got to be a team that uses our personnel better. And look, we can talk about they need to get bigger and all this other stuff, but here's the deal. Until that happens, you coach the team that you have. And the team you have is a little bit undersized, but a pretty athletic group of players in the front seven. And I felt like one of the mistakes that I think that Brian Van Gorder made and that Al Golden also made, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful by comparing the two because I'm looking at it more from an NFL standpoint, is they got so blitz heavy in order to make tackles for loss, we've got to bring pressures. And so then you use your defensive line to eat up blocks and then to free up your linebackers. Well, your linebacker play was not good.
Right.
And your defensive line was not great at eating up space because they're not a bunch of big guys. And so that's why Chris Smith looked so good at times when he was in there, because he was one of the few guys who was big enough to kind of get that job done. And that's fine. When he's in a game, use him. But that's not how you should be playing when you've got Jason Ademiel and Howard Cross playing side by side, Vince. And that was kind of the thing for me that was a little bit frustrating at times and needs to be improved upon. Is know your personnel. And here's what I say: coach what you have, recruit what you want. That's a philosophy that Notre Dame needs to have right now.
Right.
Is and I think we saw that from the offense this year. I don't think Tom Reese wants to be a 12-13 personnel all-time guy.
Yeah.
There's nothing about him that makes me think that. It was, I'm coaching what I have and I'm recruiting what I want. So what did they want? They went out and got 4 dudes at receiver and a running back that's a legit pass game weapon.
Right.
What they get in the 2024 running back call, one of the most dual threat running backs in the country. Great receiver, really good runner. That's what they're recruiting. They're recruiting pass catchers, right? You look at the 2024 tight end class. Jack Larson's a pass catcher. They're trying to recruit Carter Nelson, pass catcher. So coach what you have, recruit what you want. And I don't think Al Golden did a great job of that. But I'm willing to give him sort of I don't say a pass, but a shot at, okay, I'm going to give you a mulligan is maybe a way of saying it, Vince, because I do think there's merit to it takes time to really know what your personnel does really well.
I agree with that.
And you had a defensive line coach that was new and a linebacker coach that was new. And what were the 2 units that struggled most on defense this year? It was the 2 units with new coaches. What were the 2 best units that we saw from them this year? Cornerback and safety, right? Even though I don't think the safety talent is nearly as good as the front 7 talent, especially when Brandon Joseph was hurt and you weren't seeing a lot of Xavier Watts yet, But why was it better? Because Chris O'Leary knew the strengths and weaknesses of his players, and he put them in position to be successful. And they he could then, but he could also express to Coach Golden, here's what these kids can or cannot do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had Mike Mickens. So I am willing to give both Al Washington and Al Golden a bit of a mulligan, but it's kind of like, okay, you had yours. Now let me see changes now that you don't have the excuse of, well, I didn't know my players yet, right? Or here's what those guys did under Marcus Freeman's system. But what Al Golden did is different than what Marcus Freeman did. It is. There's this notion that Al Golden was running Marcus Freeman's defense. It's not true. Al Golden was running Al Golden's defense.
Oh, there's no question about
right?
that. No question. And let me ask you something, Brian. And I totally understand where you're coming from. You know, Tommy Rees has been the offensive coordinator for a few years now. We're starting to see kind of what he wants to do, I think. And he's had an opportunity to make that, you know, he's trying to make this offense his. I totally understand that. Do you think Al Golden's going to be around Notre Dame long enough to see his defense come to fruition if he starts to recruit that way? That's the only thing I worry about.
I don't know. And honestly, to me, I can't control that. And so it's a very fair question, Vince. It's a very fair question. But since I don't know the answer to it, I can't possibly address it. You know, so to me, it's like I felt like as a coach in college that your job is to recruit like you're going to be there forever. And then if a job comes along, then you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But you've got to coach like you're going to be there forever. And so what you'll see from some coaches is if they don't think they're going to be there long, they just don't recruit.
Yeah.
And we've seen that before.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I mean, I don't hear Al Golden's name a whole lot with recruits, but maybe he doesn't feel he needs to because, you know, Mike Mickens does a great job and Marcus Freeman is involved. I don't know.
Yeah.
But my hope is that he's coaching like he's going to be here for a while. And then if a job comes, then you can handle that. And that's kind of what I want to see from him. But, you know, look, all I can do is say you're here now. And so you're here now. Here's what you need to do to get the 2023 defense rolling.
Right.
And that's another point, Vince, is it's even more so if you're not going to be, if you don't, let's just say hypothetically, and this is purely hypothetical, because again, I don't know what Al Golden's plans are. I have said this before. I've met Al Golden several times, and he's always been a very good, decent man. But we've never like sat down and talked ball. It's always been like at a coach's convention, you know, I don't like he was at Virginia when we had a thing on our campus at Christopher Newport where it was the Virginia staff, the Bowling Green staff when Tim Beckman was there, and our staff kind of got together and we just kind of talked ball, shared some ideas and some different things. And I mean, I remember sitting down with Mike Groh. I remember sitting down with Anthony Poindexter. I don't know if Al Golden was there or not. I don't remember him. So like the point is he may have been there, but he was talking with the defensive coaches. I was talking with Mike Groh and the offensive coaches. And so I can't really, I never talked ball with him. So I don't know kind of I don't know him personally to know that if he's got his eye somewhere else. And so I don't want to put that on him because I don't know that. But if he is hypothetically has his eye on a head coaching job or an NFL job, let's just make that presupposition just for argument's sake. Then he even more so needs to coach to the current talent because he needs to maximize it.
Right.
So the way Al Golden coached this year, Vince, is to me, kind of it didn't make a lot of sense to me, you know, like he was kind of coaching to, hey, we got to do what we got to do to win this game, right? Which is I think is what you need to do, but there wasn't a focus on let me coach to the talent of my players as much as you want to see, which is why when they would bring Clarence Lewis in the game, they'd ask him to cover just like they asked Benjamin Morrison to cover.
Right.
That's not coaching your personnel. And so then you saw Clarence at times get put in position where he shouldn't have been put in a position to be in one-on-one in those situations. So that's the frustrating thing for me. But to the point, though, I think that a key for him is he's got to say, okay, what do we got to do besides, again, just upgrading our talent level?
Right.
But what can we do to get more production from our front seven? And that's something that I want to see because that was also an issue in fairness to Al Golden, that was also a bit of an issue, Vince, in 2021. The run game production in 2021 wasn't really that great.
Yeah.
And so this year, Notre Dame finished 34th in the country in tackles for loss with 85. And let's see where they were with tackles for loss per game, because obviously that 38th in tackles for loss per game. And then in 2021, Notre Dame ranked 51st in tackles for loss per game at 6.3. This year they jumped up a little bit to, I think it was 6.5 this year. So a little bit of a jump. But last year it was more of a sack driven team, right? In 2021. This
Oh
year,
yeah.
they were a sack driven team. They had 41 sacks last year under Marcus Freeman, and then 38 this year under Al Golden. So, almost half their tackles for loss were sacks, where with the better defenses you see a wider gap. You see like a third of the sacks are the tackle for loss numbers, where with Notre Dame it's almost half. It's like over 40% off, almost half. And that's where I'm saying is like there's just not enough good run game production, Vince. And that's where I think Notre Dame's going to have to get better. And it comes down to the front seven, and it comes down to your linebackers, but you've got to turn your front seven loose. And if you look at, I mean, they had some really good numbers against some of the not very good offensive lines. They had 9 against South Carolina, 8 against USC. Neither are very good offensive lines. 7 against Boston College, 8 against Syracuse. That was a good offensive line. 9 against UNLV. That was not a good offensive line. 7 against Carolina, not a good offensive line. 8 against California, not a very good offensive line. So they've got to get more consistent being disruption overall. And then that leads to the next thing, Vince, which is turnovers. The more disruptive you are, the more turnovers you force, because it's twofold, Vince, right? As an offensive coach, you know this. The more you get put in long yardage situations, the greater their chance there is that you force a turnover, because your quarterback gets into, I have to throw it down the field more. And then the other part is the more disruptive you are, the more chance there's turnovers, because quarterback rushes a throw or batted balls or whatever. Yep. And that's the thing is, Notre Dame was not a very disruptive team as a whole. When you include total disruptions, tackles for loss, batted balls, turnovers, they did not rank very high this year, because they weren't.
Well, they weren't turning the ball over at all at the beginning of the year.
Right.
And that was one of the most disappointing things, I think, going into this year, was the lack of turnovers. I mean, fumbles, interceptions, whatever. Like they were not disruptive at all. I'd say the first half of the season. I mean, we had a countdown going at one point. It's like, when are they going to get their first turnover? Like,
it was game 5.
It was horrible. I mean,
they didn't get the first turnover like game 5.
It was bad. It was bad. And to say that they finished where they did, tells you where they ended up second half. But you need that the whole season. You need to be disruptive the entire season. You can't just. You're not going to be a good defense unless you're turning the ball over. You've got to get that ball back. You've got to be able to, help your offense get the ball in plus territory, etc. And they were just not good at that at the beginning of the year. And that needs to be an emphasis moving forward, is just disruptions.
And they were never great at it. I mean, they finished the year with 15 turnovers, which is pretty impressive when you consider.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, they didn't get their first interception until game 5. They got their first turnover in game 4. They got a fumble. Remember, they had a fumble, the fumbled snap against North Carolina. But still, 15 is not a great number in forced turnovers. And when you look at it, Vince, 5 of those, a third of their turnovers came against Boston College. One team who's really bad. They only had 4 games the entire year, 4 out of 13 games where they had more than one turnover forced in a game. And that's not good enough.
Right.
I mean, here's a crazy stat, Vince. Here's something that kind of concerned me a little bit. Notre Dame this year finished 57th in turnovers lost, which is not good, but they still were -3 on the season. Like, that's not good. And you look at a lot of the teams that are around them, like teams that were around them, like that forced that around the same number of turnovers would force more turnovers. Now, not every great defense forces a bunch of turnovers. You know who else doesn't force a lot of turnovers? Georgia. They don't force a lot of turnovers. They had 16 this year. That's it. But that's also why Georgia's defense has been more vulnerable this season, though, Vince, right?
Sure.
Is because they haven't been better at forcing turnovers. But that's a different type of defense. And Notre Dame if Notre Dame's going to do what they do, they have to be more disruptive and have to be better at forcing turnovers.
Absolutely.
It's just as simple as that for me, Vince.
No doubt. Completely agree.
I think when you look at the talent, obviously you need to continue to upgrade your talent across the board. Defensive line, linebacker, corner. I think there's a bit of a gap between the older talented offensive linemen or defensive linemen and some of the younger talented defensive linemen. Like there's a little bit of a gap right now, but there's a lot of young talent on the roster. There's a lot of young talent coming in. But like the 2021 class, only like 2 defensive linemen in it.
Right.
It's Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye. That's not good enough. You can't have years like that. And that's something that happened in the under the past staff that just wasn't good enough.
Right.
And
especially when you want to play defensive line the way you
Right.
need to play defensive line. You need to be 8 deep minimum on your defensive line. And if you're only bringing in 2 a year, that's
right. And there was consistency. Like in 15, they had this, they landed Jerry Tillery and 3 other defensive tackles. Now, none of those guys were all that good. So like Elijah Taylor, Micah Treadway, and Brandon Tiassum. But then they signed no edge players.
Yeah.
And then the next year, they signed Bo Wallace, but then he didn't make it academically, which you had to have known that he was going to be an academic risk, and you should have kept recruiting edge players. And then the next year, you signed 4 good defensive ends, but 0 defensive tackles. Just that inconsistency. That's got to be better. They signed 3 on signing day last year, defensive linemen. Tyson Ford didn't go by with Donovan Heinisch. But obviously, there were linebackers that we had mentioned when Josh Burnham signed it. This is a kid who could potentially outgrow linebacker. So there was always that
pretty quickly,
very quickly. They're very excited about his future there. Yeah. So you end up with you got 4 from that class, you got 4 from this incoming class, which is that's about where you want to be on a consistent basis. So numbers wise is good.
Practicing at Viper, I don't know how permanent that is.
Right,
but
I'm not including him because we don't know yet if that's going to be permanent. But if so, then you got 5, right? So.
Right.
And Junior's a guy that I always thought would be better eventually becoming a big end as opposed to a Viper. He's just not physically going to be there just yet. He's going to need some time to kind of get to that point. But, for me, Vince, the talent of the defensive line needs to continue to get better, but it's still pretty good. It's about, can you develop it? That's the big question mark D-line. I think linebacker talent, there's, again, a big gap between the older guys and the younger guys.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of talent in that younger group, right? With the current freshmen and then, of course, the incoming freshmen. You got to keep doing that, and then you got to develop it. Cornerback, development and recruiting right now is just as good as any position on the roster.
Yeah.
And then safety. That's the one position where you got to look at and say the talent is not where it needs to be. And you're fortunate that you recruited some players at other positions that had the ability to move over there and show potential. But we're crossing our fingers hoping that Ramon Henderson breaks out next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a given, right? Because I still have questions if he's a natural football player like Xavier Watts is, right? That's the thing about Xavier, Vince. He's a natural football player.
Yes.
Cam Hart could make the transition he made because he's a football player. Mm-hmm. Now, he took some time to learn technique and all that, but you knew that Cam was going to get there because he's a football player. I still don't know if Ramon Henderson is a football player like that. I know he's athletic and long and all that, but does he have the instincts? He still hasn't shown that consistently.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a question mark. But the fact that we're writing this and hoping that Ramon pans out, because after that, it's what? It's maybe DJ Brown comes back for a 6th year. A transfer. There's an update we have on a portal kid from Oklahoma State that we had an update on last night. And then you got your freshman class, which doesn't have the dude that you had committed to you for a year.
Yeah.
That's a position where, we've hammered out Washington for his recruiting and his coaching. I think Chris O'Leary has shown me in 2 years he's a really good position coach.
I agree.
He's got to upgrade his recruiting because to be a championship caliber coach, you got to be able to do both.
Right.
Got to be able to do both, especially at a skill position. Like Harry Heastand can get away with that because offensive line can be guys that fit what I do, and they don't have to be elite athletes. But man, I'm great at coaching them, and we can have a great offensive line. Now I'm saying he can get away with it. He doesn't get away with it. Then
right.
I'm just making the point, right?
Yeah.
We saw that from Clemson, like in 2018 and 2016. They didn't have great offensive lines, but they were well coached and they fit what they were trying to do.
Right.
You can't get away with that at skill positions. You need guys that can do both.
Mm-hmm.
And at least Chris O'Leary can do one, but that's a guy that's going to have to up his recruiting in a big way moving forward because the talent level at safety, there's a big gap between the other 3 positions right now and then safety when you talk about the overall talent level on this football team.
No, I agree. Safety is an area that they need to address. I think they have to address it in the transfer portal just because of the way things kind of shook out. I am high on Hillman. If they decide to put him at safety, that's great. but I don't want to put all my eggs in a true freshman's basket.
Right.
I just don't feel
Well,
good
and
about
he's a
that.
true freshman that has played so many other
Right,
things. He's
exactly.
he's
It's
more
gonna take
Jeremiah
some
Owusu-Koramoah.
It's going
Vince,
to take him some time.
remember when Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah signed? You and I both were really high on him because you could see the athleticism, but we also knew he's going to need time to build up his
Right.
body and learn how to play the game, the position he's going to ask him to play, because he was a quarterback and a safety and then sometimes an edge rusher, and he had no position.
Right.
Brandon Hillman's going to probably need time to learn a position. And yeah, I think he's got a shot to be a good safety, but you and I were also saying, boy, I think this kid could be a great rover.
Right.
Right. So I think he's an alley safety to rover. He's not a take the top off defense. And if you're going to be a man cover team, you need a free safety. Who is that guy?
Right.
But Don Schuler's better as an alley guy. Ben Minich is better as an alley guy to a slot guy. Right. So that's the thing, is you've got to do a better job there. And that doesn't mean that they didn't bring in good players. I love a Don Schuler as a player.
No, that's not
Ben
saying
Minich
that at all.
surprised me a lot. I'm not saying you're saying
right,
that.
right. I'm agreeing with you.
But you can't bring that class in a year after signing no one. And that's my issue, right?
And to be honest with you, whether they find that person in the transfer portal, I also think that Clarence Lewis could be that kid. With some, with some coaching, obviously, but I also trust Coach O'Leary based on what he's been able to do with guys coming to him who didn't have safety experience. I mean, he has coached elite, high-level guys like Hamilton, and he's also coached guys who have never played safety before and turned them into pretty darn good safety. So I give him some clay, let him mold away. I think the sooner the better for Clarence Lewis, if that's going to be the case. But I think he could be that center field guy, and that would be huge.
Right.
That would be huge.
Agree. So that's an area where it's going to have to get better, Vince. There's no doubt. Let's go to the offense, Vince, because the defense has to get better, but the defense was still the best. Like, why we're hard on the defense is because, number one, it wasn't as good as it could have been, or three reasons. It wasn't as good as it could have been. It wasn't as good as it has been. And because we can point to areas where it can and needs to get better. Didn't maximize its potential as a unit. But we're hard on it because of the standard that had been set before. Right?
Absolutely.
Notre Dame can't afford to take a step back on defense.
Right.
Why? Because the offense hasn't been very good for a long time. And that's the side of the ball that more often than not, outside of 2015, it's been the offense that's held this team back. Like the 2017 offense was really dynamic, but what they do in the Miami game, what they do in the Stanford game, all right, what they do in, they couldn't what they do in the Georgia game. In those big games, the offense couldn't score the points. Vince only needed 21 points to beat Georgia. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. And couldn't do it. They only needed 24 points to beat Georgia the second time and couldn't do it.
Right.
And so the offense has to step up.
Yeah, and we've talked about it on numerous occasions when we talk about what a championship level team looks like. Look, you got to have a good defense. There's no doubt about it. But even if in a vacuum, the playoffs this year, you have to be able to score points. You have to be able to score points in order to be a championship level team. I mean, say what you want to about Georgia and how good their defense is. How many points did they have to score in the semifinal game in the 40s just to win that game? And it was a shootout. You need to be able to score points. You can't have games.
Scoring 40 points on the knot would have got you 0-2 in the playoff games this year.
Right, exactly.
And this year's not an exception.
No,
it's
not an anomaly.
Constant thing.
Yes.
Here's the stance. Here's the thing I always said. Defense wins championships is the expression people use for a long time. And what I have said is defense now will get you there. It'll get you to the dance, right? But the chip comes home because you can score points.
Right.
That's Absolutely. The reality of it.
No question about it. It'll get you there, but it's not going to get you the championship that you want. You need to be able to score points. I mean, I don't know. It's just so obvious that that's what we need. And you can't have a Stanford game where you don't score more than 16 points. You can't have the Georgia games where, like you said, if you score 25 points, you win both those games. Like 25 points. Come on now. You have to be able to score points to win big games. And if Notre Dame can't do it, they're not going to be a championship level team. Period.
Right. And look, offensive line has to be more consistent, right? That's a part of it. Has to get better. Sure. Receiver recruiting and development has to get better. I think that's trending in a good direction. There's a lot of things that have to happen, right, with the
Mhm.
offense for it to get better. But at the end of the day, here's the reality of it. I don't think Notre Dame has to be a 40. This is why the defense can't take a step back. The way the defense has been in the past, Notre Dame has never needed to score 40 in any of its playoff games. It just needed to score 32 and
Right.
31,
Yeah.
right? Because the defense has been good enough. Now, the Bama game, you can make an argument for about they might have needed to get to 40 in that game because I do think Bama called the dogs off a little bit. Having said that, if the offense was better, I don't know if Bama would have had the ball as much as it did in that game.
Sure.
So there's a counter argument to that. And so those are the things that I point to, Vince, and I say, like, that's why it's important for this offense to be able to score, but it's also why the defense can't take a step back. But having said that, when I look at this offense, they've got to be able to get to averaging around 38 to 40, right? But it's really about consistently getting into the 30s in the big games.
Yes.
Right. And you look at the Ohio State game. I think that if you would have scored more early, Ohio State would have been forced to open things up a little bit. Maybe that game becomes a little bit more higher scoring. You needed to score more points against USC. You would have needed to score more points if you'd have got a rematch against Ohio State, because what you and I said back then was Ohio State's going to be a much better team later in the year than they are at the beginning. And that turned out to be true.
Oh, absolutely.
They were never the team we thought they were going to be, but they were still better late in the year than they were early. And so you've got to be able to score and score in the big games. And Notre Dame's their scoring average hasn't been their problem. Their problem has been is when they get into big games, they can't score at all. And let's think about it. 14 points in the BCS title game back in 2012. And then the next big game you get into is Ohio State in 2015. You're able to score, your points and your stats look okay. You scored 28 points, but you had a Will Fuller 80-yard touchdown at the end, late in the game when the game was no longer in doubt. It was 38-21, and Will Fuller rips off an 80-yard touchdown on a missed tackle because he's really fast. But then you go into 2016, you can't score in some of the big games. You go into 2018, you score 24 points against Michigan. But luckily, your defense was good enough to win you the game. You score, 3 points in the college football playoff game? Okay. That's terrible. 2017, Georgia, you scored 19 points against Georgia. I skipped 2017. 2017, you scored 19 points against Georgia in a loss. You go to the postseason, right down the stretch. You climb all the way up to number 3, and you score 8 points against Miami. 8 points against Miami. You blow a fourth quarter lead against Stanford, and you end up only scoring 20 points against Stanford that year. And then you get into the postseason that year, and you win. Why? Because your defense. You beat LSU in the bowl game because your defense. Your offense stepped up late, but they should have blown that LSU team off the map. Danny Etling at quarterback, give me a break.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into 2019, same deal. You scored 17 points against Georgia and 14 points against Michigan. The only two good teams they played all year. You scored a combined 31 points. And your defense gave you the ball against Georgia at midfield with 2 minutes left, down 6 points. You needed to go 52 yards, or was it 4?
They were on the plus side, I thought.
Or the plus 48?
I'm pretty sure they were on the plus 48.
It was one of the 48.
I'm pretty sure it was the plus 48.
And you get nothing.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of one of those things, Vince, where it's and same thing in 2020. You score on a depleted Clemson defense, but then when you play them in the game that matters, you can't score. You score 14 points. And 7 of those points came in the fourth quarter of the game and no longer in doubt. And then you score, 14 points against Bama? Again, 1 touchdown came at the very end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Cincinnati in 2021, couldn't score. Oklahoma State in the Fiesta Bowl, couldn't score in the second half. So it's been the same story over and over and over and over again of just barely even getting to 20. 2015 was the same thing, Vince. You couldn't score against Clemson in that big game. Now that season is a bit of an exception because you did score enough to beat Stanford. I mean, you scored a touchdown to give you a lead with 30 seconds left. What more can you ask for of the offense?
Right.
At that point in time, right?
At the end, yeah.
Right. But the point is, Vince, you've got to be able to score more points. It's such an important thing to be able to score more points. And until that changes, nothing's. I
feel like we saw flashes though in the bowl game.
But wouldn't you say we've always kind of seen flashes?
At
though.
times, yeah.
Like, look, we saw flashes in 2015. We saw, I mean, the stretch of play from second half against BC to Wake in 2017, Notre Dame was scoring well over 40 points per game. And that was against good teams. They scored 38 on the road against a 10-win Michigan State team that year, right? Pick six obviously was part, but they also did that, Vince, with their fourth string running back playing most of the second half
Right.
of that game. They still ran the ball in Michigan State. You scored 49 against a top 15 Michigan team or USC team. You scored 35 against an NC State team that had an entire starting defensive line, got drafted in the fourth round or higher, and the starting middle linebacker on that team was a third-round draft pick that started in the Super Bowl last year for the Bengals, right? I mean, you were blowing out people. You looked like an elite team. And then it gets to Miami and, right, 2020, prior to the end. Here's the thing about 2020. If you look from the Clemson game to the Syracuse game, that offense was clicking. I mean, they ripped up BC, they ripped up North Carolina, they ripped up Syracuse, they ripped up Clemson, and then all of a sudden you fade it late, partly because of the injuries. I mean,
Sure.
you got to give them a little bit of an asterisk there because they lost Jared Patterson, they lost Tommy Kramer, then Josh Lugg got hurt, or then Zeke Correll got hurt, and then Josh Lugg is playing, but he's injured. He shouldn't have been playing, but he battled and took one for the team. And you look at that team and you say, man, boy, that team it showed flashes, Vince, of being a 40-plus point per game team in November of 2020. We saw it last year in the second half of the season. We saw it this year in the bowl game, and we saw it at other times this year. It's just one of those things, Vince, where it's like, I'm tired of the flashes.
Yeah,
it's got to be consistent.
Yeah.
And that's what we haven't seen. But to your point, you can't ignore what that offense looked like in the bowl game. Schematically, tempo-wise, big play-wise, aggressiveness-wise, and did it with Lorenzo Styles, Deion Colsey, and Tobias Merriweather, three very talented players, combining for a grand total of, let me add up the catches.
0 plus 0 plus
carry
0.
The one, divide 0.
I was going to say, did I miss one in my head?
Right. 0. So the point is, you can't even look, and they turned it over 3 times.
Yeah.
You can't even say, boy, they were, because what you gotta be careful of doing as a fan and as an analyst is taking the anomaly game and saying that's so like Clemson was an anomaly game. You're not going to go out against top 5 or top 10 or top 15 teams and consistently run for 280 plus and throw for minus 100 and win by 21.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not like, oh, that recipe works. Well, yeah, it worked that night, but it doesn't work if you do it again the next week. And so you've got to avoid the looking at the anomalies. But that's what makes the Gator Bowl, and I think this is what you're getting at, Vince. This is what makes the Gator Bowl so promising because they did not play a clean game. They left like 3 touchdowns on the field.
Agreed.
you know what I mean?
Well, one was a pick 6 going the other way. Like,
right.
No doubt. Yeah.
Right. And so that's the encouraging thing. It's like, no, they did not play a super clean game. It still had 45 points and 558 yards. And 3 of your more talented players didn't do a darn thing. You turned it over 3 times. Chris Tyree had some clutch plays, but didn't touch it a ton. The offensive line played good, but it didn't play great. It was just, your dudes are pretty good. And they could take it. Here's the thing. You could take, like, if Will Fuller didn't have a game back in 2015, offense wasn't going to score a lot. If the run game wasn't great in 2017, no chance of scoring. This team, Vince, they didn't run the ball early, so they made up for it in other ways. Yeah. Lorenzo Styles and your outside receivers weren't making a lot of plays, so other guys stepped up and made plays. That's what I think gives me optimism about this team, Vince, is because I do feel like they finally got the talent level to the point where there's not just one guy you can take out and say, take him out or take this part of the game out, and they can't win. You can't say that about this Notre Dame team if these guys continue to develop like that. And that to me, more than anything, was the most encouraging part of the bowl game. Is the O-line didn't play like it did against Clemson.
Right.
Deion Colsey didn't play like he did in the last half of the season. Lorenzo Styles didn't show the guy he was in the bowl game the year before when he had 8 catches for over 100 yards. Tobias Merriweather didn't come back with a vengeance, after being injured. None of those guys did anything. And yet they still ripped South Carolina up. So, yeah, there's a lot of optimism. But the question is, Vince, can they do that week after week after week? And can they do that against a better opponent? That's the question.
It remains to be seen. But they're going to get opportunities next year. That's for sure. The schedule that you kind of broke down a little bit in your article over on irishbreakdown.com, a little early look at next year's schedule. They're going to have opportunities to make a case both offensively and defensively if they are where they need to be, to compete for a playoff spot and that elusive playoff win, and I'm cautiously optimistic with the way things are going, with what I saw in the Gator Bowl for sure, from what I'm hearing about the offseason and things of that nature. And I'm super excited for spring practice, and I'm super excited. It sucks that we got to wait 8 to 9 months before we get to see it, but there's going to be a lot of opportunities with this schedule moving forward. A lot of opportunities to prove it. I mean, basically just to prove it, So it's going to be fun. I mean, next year is going to be a lot of fun, but they have to improve the points that we just made. They have to get better at those spots. They just have to.
I think one thing too is finding better balance. You need a more efficient and explosive pass game. I think that's the biggest thing. And part of that is better. The receiver play in recent years was so disappointing because, and we'll get to quarterback in a minute, I promise. But receiver play to me, like right now, you look at Notre Dame and their offensive line to me has to be more consistent, but I fully expect it to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be really good next year. Yep. You've got one of the best running back. Notre Dame can lose 2 running backs
and still
next year and still have a really good running back room.
Yeah.
Because let's just say for some crazy reason, they're headed to the game and Audric Estime and Logan Diggs are both carpooling to the game and their car gets stopped and they can't make the game. I'm using that as a stupid example because I don't want to say they both get hurt.
And you don't want to say that they're both going to transfer or whatever the case may be.
Whatever. They can't make it. Okay, so you trot out Chris Tyree and Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne and Jeremiah Love. You're good.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the thing that is so important about the way that they recruited it. It started with Lance Taylor, and it's Dylan McCullough did a great job of inheriting a really good situation and then building on it recruiting-wise, but then recruiting the kids that he inherited. He coached the heck out of the kids that he inherited. And he said, what do these kids do well? Let me build to that.
Right.
And that's what good coaches do. And that's why that was just a brilliant hire because I'll say this, Vince, we haven't talked enough about this. Let's put the offensive coordinator to the side because that's such a toxic conversation.
Of course.
But take him away. The rest of the staff is as good of a Notre Dame staff as we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
A very long time. Dylan McCullough is one of the best in the business. There's no doubt about it. Harry Heastan is one of the best in the business. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. Chancey Stuckey's still young and developing, but I loved what he did this year, Vince. Recruiting-wise, he did great. And look, the receiving room got better and better and better and better as the year went on.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the kind of thing for me, Vince, is you've got to continue to do that now. You've got to figure out how can I get more out of Lorenzo Styles? How can I help Tobias Merriweather take that next step? Because Vince, I mean, Sean Davis and Malik Zaire had Caleb Smith, the kid from Virginia Tech, on the show the other day, and he was talking about like how impressed he was by Tobias Merriweather. I talked to people associated with the defense, and they're like, "Yeah, in practice, we can't cover that dude."
Yeah,
right. This is one of the best pass defenses in the country this year, and they talk about how they can't cover that dude. So the talent is there. How can you, as a position coach, put him in position to be the best player he can be? Right? I mean, how can you get Deion Colsey to be the best he can do? Now, look, there's only so far you can go. The coordinator has to do his part. But I'm more encouraged now than I've been in a long time that we're going to get the most out of the receiving core.
Yeah.
And then you're bringing in this talented freshman class. You're bringing in Caleb Smith, who's going to be a steady kind of play all over kind of guy that brings some size and veteran experience to the table. Jaden Thomas stepped up and was really good. And if they use him correctly, AKA put him in the slot,
he could be good.
He's really good.
Just work in the middle of the field.
And that is so important to a quarterback, like having that kind of, and the tight end play is going to be good. It's not going to be what it's been, but that's true no matter who you had at tight end, because you had one of the greatest to ever do it the last 3 years. So the key for me skill-wise, Vince, is Chancey Stuckey and Tommy Rees figuring out ways to get the Notre Dame, just getting the skill players in position to where you're using everybody.
Right.
And that's the thing for me. that's where I want to see this thing get better, is learn how to use Logan Diggs and Audric Estime, who are dudes, but then still know how to use Chris Tyree or Jadarian Price or Jeremiah Love, whoever that third running back is. Yeah, it's great that Jaden Thomas is out there balling, but use the other guys too.
Right.
And when Tommy Rees and Chancey Stuckey can kind of get on that same page, and with Dylan McCullough and Jared Parker and all those skill coaches on offense, you know, here's the thing about this year too. They were all working together for the first time. It takes time to build that kind of trust.
Absolutely.
With people. And if you look at Tommy Rees, he knew Harry really well, but all the other coaches, those aren't dudes he knew. Like Chancey Stuckey, that was John McNulty's recommendation. Now, Tommy Rees showed faith in John McNulty, saying, hey, this guy I think is going to be really good, and liked what he heard from him in the interview, and Chancey did a great job in the interview and all that. So they took a little bit of a leap of faith. It worked out. They went out and got Dylan McCullough because he's the best, but not because he has this long relationship with Tommy Rees or Marcus Freeman, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with Jared Parker. That wasn't even a guy that was more of a guy that Coach Freeman wanted. It takes time for them to come together. They're now going to have year 2 together.
Right.
You know, Dylan's going to know even more about his running backs. Jared Parker's going to know even more about his tight end room, and Chancey with the receiver room. And so there's a lot of reasons why, I wrote in an article yesterday, Vince, why I'm excited that the offense is on the verge of doing something, because I look at it and I say, this is a group that talent-wise is really good. But here's the key. Can they turn their potential into production? Right now, some of them have, some of them haven't.
Yeah.
And I think especially at receiver, if the potential can become production with half the guys on the roster, that's the thing. You don't need all 9 of them to step up. You just need half of them to be good to some degree.
Right.
If that can happen, Vince, this team's got a chance to be special. But key number 1 is somebody's got to step up and be the guy. I don't think you need a guy like a Will Fuller, but you need to have somebody steps up and says, when the game is on the line, get me the ball. And that's going to be a big part of can this pass game really be dynamic in big moments?
Sure.
And that's something we need to see.
Absolutely.
Because people say, well, you're better off without Michael Mayer. Well, here's what I know. If the game was on the line and you needed a play to be made and you couldn't scheme it up, you needed somebody to go make a play, that dude was going to go make a play. Who's that guy next year?
Who's that guy?
Right.
Exactly.
That's a big question, Vince.
It's a huge question.
Very big question.
It's a huge question. And I think what I will say is I don't know that any one guy needs to be that guy. I think they've got a couple of guys who could step up and be that guy. And that's going to make your offense even better, because you're going to have options on who that guy can be. I think Jaden Thomas could be that guy. I think Colsey could be that guy, because they've both shown flashes on third down when Michael Mayer was quadruple covered. They showed flashes they could be that guy on third down.
Yeah, but see, that's the key. Did they really show it on third down? Because they weren't being double and triple covered, right? And that's my question. Like Jaden is, can Jaden separate when everybody knows he's the guy? Right? That's the question.
Sure.
I think the bowl game maybe showed a little bit of that. Like, where
there was some separation there.
Right. But some of that was out of scheme. But then the couple of the catches he made is like, that dude was like, the one on the just insane throw from Tyler Buckner, like that was pretty decent coverage.
Yes.
Jaden just kind of accelerated late, went and got the ball.
Yeah.
Those are the things we need to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if they can do it, man, this team's going to have a chance to be good. Because I don't know about you, Vince. I could be wrong on this, but I fully believe that Notre Dame is going to have one of the 5 best offensive lines and one of the 5 best running back rooms in the country next year. I was having this argument with a buddy of mine yesterday, and he was like, I think Penn State's might be better. I'm like, based on what? He goes, well, their top 2 backs produce more numbers than Notre Dame's top 2 backs. I'm like, okay. Did they use a third back? He goes, no. I said, so you're punishing Notre Dame because they used a third back. I said, if you include Chris Tyree and include their third back, Notre Dame's got better numbers. Yeah, but like, look, there's not a lot of teams that can have a guy like Chris Tyree and say, you're not going to play him. Right. Or he's your third guy.
Right.
And, that's an exciting part, but I fully expect, Vince, I don't know if you do. I know they got to replace some guards, but I fully expect Notre Dame to have an outstanding offensive line there.
I think you've had a full year with Harry Hiestand for, 99% of these guys who've never been coached by him before. There was a feeling out period at the beginning of the year. It's the best way I can put it, right? They've had a whole full year of him. They're going to have a second off season with him. That's going to be one of the top two positions that I have zero worries about. Offensive line and corner. Like, I have zero worries about those two positions. And there's something drastic is going to happen for me to not feel that way about those two positions. You know, and I know that they have to fulfill, or they have to fill 2/5 of the starting. I get that. But there's a ton of talent in that room. And I also trust the position coach because, like you said, he's got the track record of putting together the best 5 guys. Whatever that looks like, he has that track record. And the 3 guys that are returning, they're pretty good too. And, you know, arguably, you know, 3 of the best guys that were a part of the offensive line last year. But the thing is, all 5 raised their game from the year before. So, you know, I don't want to slight anybody by saying that, but they're going to be able to find 2 guys to fill that role, and they're going to mesh in fairly seamlessly with the 3 guys that are already there.
Well, it's something we've seen Coach Heastan do before. You know, like the 2017 line, that was so good. I mean, they had to move guys. I mean, you had 4 returning starters from that previous line, but you were moving Alex Bars inside the guard, and so you had to move him around. You were moving Mike McGlinchey in 2016 from right to left tackle. I mean, so we've seen him move guys around before, you know, and so I'm confident we're going to see that replacement happen. But you know, for me, Vince, I just want to see it, right? Yeah. But I know that they're talking to people. They're very high on Billy Schrauth, very high. Like they think he's going to compete for a starting job next year. I mean, you kind of know what you can get. You know what you're going to get from Andrew Kristofic. Very steady, you know, just a very steady guy. Knows what to do. Knows how to do his job. I mean, if those 2 guys are your starting guards next year, you're in a pretty good position. And if somebody beats one of those 2 guys out, it means that guy really had a good offseason.
Exactly.
And, you know, and that's just the reality of it. So that's kind of the part that I want to get to, Vince. But look, here's the final piece of this whole thing, right? We can talk about all these other things that we want to talk about, Vince. We can talk about, you know, they got to get, you know, offensive line's got to be more consistent, and it does. The receiver play's got to improve, and it does. And, you know, running back room, you just got to keep doing what you're doing and all that. Tight ends but at the end of the day, more often than not, Notre Dame's quarterback play just hasn't been good enough. And there's been flashes of it, like you said.
Sure.
But just not good enough. And that's where they need to get better. And until that changes, you're just going to always be short. I mean, look, like you look at Stetson Bennett at Georgia. He's okay. I don't think he's really that good, but he's a money kid and he makes plays when he needs to. But the reality is, Vince, Georgia's the anomaly. They're not the rule. And you're not going to be able to build a team the way Georgia does. You're not going to be able to recruit the way Georgia does. You're going to need a quarterback that's more dynamic. Clemson could not have won either one of their championships with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. That's not a shot at Stetson Bennett. It's just that team's made up differently. Clemson could not have won a championship in 2015 if you trade quarterbacks and put Jacob Coker at Clemson and put Deshaun Watson at Alabama. That's not a 5-point game. That's a 25-point game.
Right.
You know, and so that's most programs aren't that way. And until they get the quarterback position to that level, like let's be honest, even in 88, they did not win with just a game manager quarterback. They had a dynamic quarterback in 88 and 89.
They did.
Now it was dynamic. It wasn't like it is today.
Somebody
said
in a
to
different
me,
way, yeah.
Well, how can you say Tony Rice was great? He only had 2 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions in 1989. And I was like, and he still was a Heisman runner-up, which tells you that the game is different. Yes. The game is different then, and the offense was different then, but he was dynamic at what they asked him to do, which is why Notre Dame beat, 12 ranked teams in a 2-year stretch? That's insane. They went 7-1 against ranked teams in 2008 or 1989. They went 5-0 against ranked teams in 1988. And 4 of the teams they beat in 1988 were ranked in the top 10. I'm actually going to pull this up, Vince, because the 1988 Notre Dame results was just insane. Like if you look at the teams they beat. So if you look at the year-end rankings, Notre Dame beat number 2. So they beat number 2 Miami. They beat number 4 Michigan. They beat number 5 West Virginia, and they beat number 7 USC. 4 wins over top 10 teams that year. when they won the title. The next year, they had 7 games where they beat a team ranked in the top 15, and their only loss was on the road to the eventual national champions. So that's the thing that I look at, Vince, and I say, why? They had a dynamic quarterback, but the 1993 team, which might have even had a better all-around team, some people argue. I love Kevin McDougal, but he wasn't Tony Rice.
Right.
He wasn't Tony Rice. And so you need that kind of guy. Unfortunately, Brady Quinn never had the team around him like Tony Rice and Kevin McDougal did. Jimmy Clausen didn't have that, and he didn't have the leadership ability. Everett Golson got ruined by George Whitfield, and Brian Kelly never was able to be that guy. Some of the guys have kind of gotten in their own way. You know, Deshaun Kaiser got in his own way. Malik Zaire had injuries, stuff you can't, but the talent hasn't been where it needed to be in recent years. And there's a lot of talk about how Tommy Rees can't develop quarterbacks. And I think that's to be determined to a degree, number one. But where I somewhat disagree, Vince, is I don't think Ian Book could have been any better in college. I think they got the most out of Ian Book.
I agree. I think
there's nothing that you can do as a coach that's going to make Ian Book better at reading defenses. If Sean Payton couldn't figure it out, then why are we holding Tommy Rees to that standard, right?
Bingo.
So, I think he did develop Tommy. I think he did a really good job of developing Jack Cohn last year. Jack Cohn threw for almost as many yards last year at Notre Dame than he did his entire career at Wisconsin. And he threw for more touchdowns last year at Notre Dame than he did his entire career at Wisconsin. And you saw him develop as the year went on from a technical standpoint. And so I look at it and I say, I think he has done a pretty solid job of developing. Now, the question is, he has shown he can develop a type of player.
Yes, agreed.
He's got to show me that he can develop a little bit more broad, or show me that you can recruit players that fit what you want to do. That second part is what we're seeing a difference since Brian Kelly left. Because I'll give you a little inside baseball here.
I love inside baseball.
One of the things that I had been told, like I was crushing Tommy Rees last year for the quarterback recruiting, crushing him for it. But one of the reasons I've backed off of that is because I start to talk to some people that were kind of in the know. And I'm not talking about Tommy Rees because this is not something he's ever told me. And I don't, talk to him about these kind of things or talk to him much at all. But who he wanted at quarterback last year was not who Brian Kelly wanted. And the reason that they were late getting on a couple guys that some of the staff liked was because Brian Kelly wouldn't sign off. Brian Kelly had to sign off on who they went after on quarterback. Brian Kelly's the guy that wanted Drew Pine. Now, the other coaches liked him, but there were higher quarterbacks on the board for other people.
Yeah.
And the same thing. And so that's kind of gone on and on and on. That's why they ended up with Steve Angeli last year, because Kelly wouldn't sign off on Drew Aller in time and Sam Horn in time. So these other guys in time. Cade Klubnik, for example, is another one that Tommy Rees recruited and liked, but Kelly wouldn't sign off on it. So they never offered him. And so since Brian Kelly's left, you could say, well, the offense wasn't great this year, but you know what's been really good since Brian Kelly left? Quarterback recruiting. And they got Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr. Why? Because Tommy Rees could go get who he wanted to get and focus on who he wanted to. And then Coach Freeman would be like, who do you want? I'll help you go get him. And guess what? They've done a pretty good job with that.
That's fair.
And so, I think he's done a good job developing. Now, can he put together an elite offense? That's a different conversation. I'm talking about his job as a quarterback coach.
Right.
And so, the offensive coordinator, he's still got a lot to prove. But I actually think the quarterback development, for the most part, has been pretty solid under his tenure. He did a bad job with Phil Dracovic. That I will say. Did a bad job with Phil Dracovic. But that was also in his first and second year as a coach ever. I think he's improved. And that's something that I feel like too many people aren't willing to look at with him as a young coach and say, hey, did the guy get better or not? And that's the thing that I think is missing from this conversation. There's not enough of that. Are we being objective and are we allowing him or have you just kind of set your opinion on who he is and it doesn't matter what he's going to do? This is who he is. There's too much of that with Notre Dame fans.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what he does. It's just going to be one of those things where people are going to say, nope, I don't care what he does. I don't like him. And so I'm not going to give him credit for anything. I'm going to spin it every other way I can possibly spin it and to where you take the credit away from him. Like I've used people, well, they only got Minchie and Carr because of Marcus Freeman. What? Huh? Like, what are you talking about? So that's the thing that bothers me is like we can't. It's hard to have a really honest and objective conversation about Tyrese, to be completely honest with you. It really is. So that's that. Do you have anything to say, Vince? Please add to the conversation.
I'm with you 100%. I think that the quarterback position at Notre Dame is what, I mean, we've said it 100 times, right? It's what has been lacking to get Notre Dame to the next level, to get them where they needed to be. And it is frustrating. It is so fixable. It felt like it was so fixable for so long, and it just wouldn't get fixed.
Right.
And you kind of giving us some inside baseball there is very helpful and not at all surprising.
And not how I perceived the situation to be at first, which is why I hammered him on it.
Right.
So
right. No, which I think is fantastic. I think that it really puts into perspective, and it makes a lot of sense timeline-wise as to why all of a sudden now Notre Dame recruiting has gotten so much better as far as the quarterback position is concerned. I mean, did they get Dante Moore? I'm sure there's blame to go around. Sure.
Well, they had Dante Moore. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's one, like, I'll fault the Notre Dame staff for not getting Keon and Jason Moore and some other guys, but I don't know what they could have done different with Dante. I mean, I think the only criticism people have with the Dante Moore recruitment is you guys should have seen what was going on earlier and bailed out sooner.
Right.
That's the criticism I think most have. I mean, I think most people are smart enough to know that the Notre Dame coaches aren't why they lost Dante Moore. Dante Moore's dad is why they lost.
I completely agree. Completely agree. So to rebound and get a guy like Kenny Minchie, though, I think speaks volumes to where they were at, especially when it was crickets there for a long time, after the Dante Moore stuff happened and all of that. So I think that's fantastic. Obviously the Carr kid, that's fantastic. I mean, he could end up being the number one quarterback in that class when it's all said and done. Now, since he's committed to Notre Dame, that probably won't happen. But from a from a skill standpoint, I think there's an argument to be made.
Very, very true.
That he could be that guy. And I got
to interrupt you because it is just broke that Sam Hartman is committed to Notre Dame. So Sam Hartman made it official. He will be Notre Dame's next quarterback. So I got to publish this stuff, Vince, and get it going. So why don't you go ahead and just kind of give your initial thoughts on Sam Hartman to Notre Dame?
Can I just say thank you? Because it's been a day, and I'm glad that he finally put it out there.
So why don't you get Baxter on why our show started at 2:30 and why we've been kind of dragging this offensive conversation. It's like, guys, get to the point. You keep. This is why. It's like it was supposed. Okay, just please go. Okay, because I got to get this story tweeted out.
I get a phone call around noon from Brian, and I'm getting ready for the show, and I'm getting in the shower and the whole thing, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna push the show back. I expect an announcement from Sam Hartman about 1:30. Awesome. So that's fantastic. So we go about our lives. We're doing different things. I get another phone call from Brian at about 10 minutes to 2. He still hasn't announced.
Right.
He's like, I got to shower. I got to get in the shower. I got to make this happen. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait, blah, 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 blah. So about 2:15, we're like, hey, we're going to go live. We're going to start talking because this was our topic that we planned on having all along.
Right.
And so like, hey, we'll get into it. And then if he ever announces, we'll just make it happen and we'll talk about it and we'll just go from there. And we're talking and we're talking and we're talking.
Well, then I was told during the show that it would be 3:30.
And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
And then here we are at 3:45. And it's like, I'm hitting refresh nonstop.
Yes.
It's just like, come on, man.
And I'm thinking to myself, I think the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to send a gift to Sam Hartman, and it's a watch because that would be fantastic. No, I'm just
although that'd be a little hypocritical for me to do, considering you can do that. I can't do that.
Oh, no, I'm just joking. But no, hey, it is finally official. Obviously, he was on campus today. If you were a member of the message board, you knew that was going to be the case. There are some great pictures on his Twitter page of him in the number 10 jersey with the football, smiling ear to ear, and it just says onward. So it's exciting. He is officially a part of the Notre Dame roster, which is fantastic. And now we can actually talk about what this roster looks like moving forward now that
Right.
Sam Hartman is a part of it.
Well, I think what we're going to do is we'll probably call an audible, and no, we won't call an audible. We're going to break down Sam Hartman over the next couple days. But I think right now what we'll talk about is I want to address this point, Vince, because when I look at it, Vince, it's one of these things. Is here's kind of what I've gathered behind the scenes. So let's talk about how this whole thing played out.
Yes, let's do that.
The biggest surprise to me was how many portal quarterbacks reached out to Notre Dame, including Sam Hartman. So for all these people talking about how Notre Dame tampered with this, that, and the other thing, no, they didn't. There are avenues to have communication.
Right.
And I was told that it was actually that side that reached out to Notre Dame, including several other pretty big name quarterbacks that never jumped in the portal, reached out to Notre Dame. And there was a thought of, hey, if you jump in, we'll be interested in you. But beyond that, you can't really say a whole lot, right? So when I was first told about Sam Hartman, I was not thrilled, to be completely honest with you, Vince, because I hate that offense, and I had a very kind of low opinion of Sam Hartman because I hate that offense.
I know you do.
And so, I was like, let me dive into the film, and the more I watched it, I even told somebody, I was like, please don't let it be Sam Hartman, because there was a couple other guys, I won't say the names because those guys didn't jump in the portal and decided to stay, that were like, hey, this guy has sent out some inquiries and Notre Dame's a place he may be interested in, that kind of thing. And so Sam Hartman was not at the top of my list. I can just assure you that. But then I was like, but I'll be fair and I'll be open. And so I started watching the film, and you're like, I just get that mesh and I just get disgusted with that mesh. And then you start seeing things like, okay, well, on these play action passes where he drops back, he looks pretty clean with his mechanics. And then you say, boy, they were really good on offense the last couple of years. I think they were like 7th in 2021. I think last I checked, they were like 16th, I believe. Most recent, I think this year, although obviously bowl games play out. So let me see what their third down success rate. They dropped to 18th this year, 46.2. They were 6th last year in third down last year. And then you start to say, okay, well, let me watch some of his third down film. And then you start watching the third down film, and you're like, they do a lot more drop back on third down, and he is money on third down. So then you start to see, okay, on drop backs, he's actually really good dropping back and throwing the football. And man, his numbers in that area are really good. Then you start to study the film, you're like, this kid throws a really clean ball. When you just kind of look at pure dropbacks, boy, his accuracy in those situations is much better than it is when he's doing that mesh stuff, because that's where the other thing that concerned me too, Vince, is he turns the ball over a lot. I mean, throws a lot of interceptions, I think 26 interceptions in the last 2 years.
Yeah, 26.
And then you start breaking down the film, and like some of it is just the offense, some of it is he's getting hit as he's throwing, because he takes a lot of hits when he throws the football. And then you start looking at it and you're like, some of that stuff is just going to be because he's a real confident kid and thinks he can fit the ball in some tight windows. You just got to live with that, right? I mean, you're going to live with that if Tyler Buckner's your quarterback, but then you just kind of look at it and you say, boy, man, you see some of this stuff. Like, so you look at his numbers this year, for example, his completion percentage without any play action was 63.3% on dropbacks, right? Well, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good number. And then you look at screen game, he's very high percentage in the screen game, but he's a kid that, is going to have the ability to kind of go out there and drop back and run Notre Dame's offense. And then you say, okay, what's been lacking from the offense in recent years? They don't throw the deep ball very much or very well. Sam Hartman's numbers throwing the deep ball last year are outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the deal. In first of all, no quarterback in college football the last 2 years combined has completed more passes beyond 20 yards or more passes beyond 10 yards. If you look at just this past season alone, Sam Hartman completed 41 deep balls, which was third in the nation, and he completed 73 balls between 10 and 19, which I believe ranked him tied for second in the nation. He threw for 100. He completed 114 passes from 10 and beyond. Only one other quarterback in college football had more, and that was Drake May, with 3 more than he had. And Drake May played one more game. Drake May played 2 more games than Sam Hartman, because they played 14. Wake Forest played 13. But Sam missed the first game of the year with that heart problem. So he only played 12 games. Sam Hartman also threw 30 touchdown passes beyond 10 yards that traveled 10 yards past the line of scrimmage in the air. And the only quarterback to tie with him was a kid, Austin Reed from Western Kentucky. Drake May threw 28. He was next. By comparison's sake, Sam Hartman completed 114 passes this year in 12 games that traveled past 10 yards past line of scrimmage. And he threw 30 touchdown passes that traveled beyond 10 yards past line of scrimmage. Last year, during his Heisman Trophy season, Bryce Young in 15 games completed 104 passes that went past 10 yards past line of scrimmage. And he threw 23 touchdown passes that went past 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. So you look at it, Vince, this is a guy that can attack all the zones that we've said Notre Dame's offense has struggled to consistently attack. And this guy doesn't have like a bazooka for an arm.
Right.
But when you study the film, Vince, and you see him in dropbacks, this guy throws a really nice deep ball. And as I said, his 41 deep ball completions this season was third in the country. I'm looking at the numbers this year. He was third in the nation in deep ball completions with 41, and he was third in deep ball touchdowns with 16. That's 20 or more yards past the line of scrimmage. Doesn't mean it's a touchdown of beyond 20 yards. It means the pass was thrown beyond 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. Okay, so it was completed 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. Last year, when he played a full season, he was second in the nation in deep ball completions with 45, and he was first in the nation in deep ball touchdowns. Okay, with 20. So you're adding something to the mix that you just haven't had in recent seasons. That's the reality of it. And so to me, that's one of the reasons that this staff is going after Sam Hartman, right? Is because they want a guy that can attack down the field. That's one of the things they like about Tyler Buckner, as we saw in the bowl game, is he's going to bring more ability to really attack the tougher parts of the field than we've seen this offense have. And the scary thing is if you can do that, I mean, the run game's there, right? Like, that's the thing. The run game is there. The question is, can you hurt teams in other ways? And, you know, that's one thing you're hoping to have. And so the reality is that's one of the big things about Sam Hartman. I'll get into a little bit more of the particulars, but I think that's one of the things that you look at and say, why was Sam Hartman the guy that this staff kind of zeroed in on? It's the experience. This is a kid that right now, Vince, ranks 19th in college football history in passing yards, right? And if he throws for 3,000 yards this year for Notre Dame, right? If he wins a starting job, and if he throws for at least 3,000 yards this year, which is like less than what Jack Cohn threw for,
that's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right, he moves all the way up to number 4 all time in passing yards. You know, so I mean, he's a guy.
Gotta love the COVID year, baby.
Well, but see, you say that, but like he didn't start. His COVID year was 2020. He started 9 games as a true freshman. He started only 1 game the next year. He started, I think, like 9 games the next year after that. The COVID year, he only started 9 games the COVID year, and so you look at it and you say, you know, this is a guy that's produced. He started 45. He has 45 career starts, right? Which is like 3 seasons worth, right? I mean, a little over 3 seasons worth. But yeah, the COVID. But my point is, even if you don't just look at where he is now, all-time leader in touchdown passes in the ACC.
No, absolutely.
Second all-time in passing yards in the ACC, and he only was a full-time starter for 2 full years. So now the reality is, some of the production is going to, and by the way, he is, what did I say? He threw 110 touchdown passes. That currently ranks 18th all time in college football history. So it's a guy that produced. This is a guy that knows how to run an offense. This is a guy that, you know, can go out there and do those things. But let me give a backstory on how this went down. So 2 things were clear in all of the conversations that Notre Dame had with portal quarterbacks. And this is something I've been told, Vince, from day one.
Yep.
Day one.
Everybody needs to listen to this.
The reason that I have not been talking about this, because I was told I'm going to tell you some of this stuff, but if it gets out there, like, we're done. Right. So that's why I didn't talk a lot about this quarterback stuff. From day one, I was told two things are very clear. Number one, any quarterback that comes to us about NIL guarantees that we need to give him money to come, we don't want. Like, we don't want a guy that's looking for a payday. We want a guy that's coming for two things. Number one, he wants to compete for a championship. And number two, we're totally cool with him being someone who is willing to view it as, I want to better myself for the next level. There's nothing wrong with that.
I have no problem with
right?
that.
As long as it's coming here for a championship. But if you're looking for a payout or a payday, that's not what we're looking for. Now, you'll get money as an NIL guy, as a quarterback at Notre Dame if you win the job, but we're not paying you to come here. That's number one. Okay. Number two, every quarterback was told, you are not being promised the job. We would not be recruiting if we didn't think you could come be a really good quarterback here. But we're not handing you the job. We've got another kid, number 12, that is really talented.
Yep.
And the thing that Notre Dame has said to people from the beginning is, if Tyler Buchner doesn't get hurt in game 2, they're not looking for a portal quarterback.
Agreed.
And so this guy needs to know that whoever it is, you're not being promised something. You've got to bet on yourself a little bit too, that you're going to go out and beat this guy out. And when Jack Cohn was told the same thing, but Jack Cohn's situation was different because Jack's like, I got to beat out a true freshman Tyler Buchner and a true sophomore Drew Pine. I feel good about that one. And Jack would have come anyway. But this is one where, and when Tyler went and did what he did in the bowl game, there was no wavering. There was no wavering at all because this kid is a competitor.
Correct.
And that's that's what you want to see. He was not promised the job. Now, is he coming in expecting to start? Of course he is.
Why would he not?
But he was told he will be competing for this job in the spring. And I can assure you that Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees are going to – this has been a conversation that has happened with, from what I understand, with Tyler Buchner and with every transfer kid that's reached out to Notre Dame is, yes, you're going to come in here with certain advantages over Tyler. But the best man, the guy that gives us the best chance to win games in 2020 is going to start. I don't care if it means we screw ourselves over and we never get another transfer quarterback because of this kid coming in and not starting. If so be it, so be it. But here's what I've been told. Notre Dame has said, we believe with a couple little tweaks to our roster, including better quarterback play, that we can be a championship football team in 2023. Flat out. So people have asked, why wouldn't you just start Tyler, let him develop and make a run at 2024? Because they think this 2023 team, when you look at the landscape of college football and how their schedule sets up with Ohio State and USC at home and a depleted Clemson team, a descending Clemson team in 2020 on the road, they think this team is capable of making a run. They know that they've got a couple little tweaks that they got to make.
Sure.
Right? One of them being quarterback play has to be better. And so the way the Notre Dame staff views this is their quarterback play is going to be excellent next year because one of two things is going to happen. One is Sam Hartman wins a job, and they got a lot of confidence in him. So in 76 touchdowns, 77 touchdowns the last 2 years? 39 and 38.
That. Yeah, it was a lot. It was in the 30s, high 30s.
Correct. And so you've got him who's going to be really good. Or Tyler Buchner beats him out, which means Tyler Buchner is now finally tapped in his full potential.
Exactly.
Either way,
I'm good.
You're going to have really good quarterback play next year.
Yep.
That's why this move was made. That's why he was the guy. I was told Keaton Slovis expressed interest. No, thank you. Right?
I'm sure he did.
If they were going to bring in a guy that could compete with Tyler or not, they weren't looking to bring in a depth guy. They want to compete. But every single quarterback was told, and I've been told this multiple times by people that I trust, and I challenged them on it. No, you didn't. You didn't say that to them. Yeah, we did. Every single kid was told, you got to earn the job. And from what I was told, Sam Hartman never flinched once in those conversations.
Awesome.
Never once did he flinch. Now, he's got to be smart enough to think, okay, can I win this job? And he thinks that he can, as he should.
He's not coming here to sit.
He
the
wasn't
bench.
promised.
Like, that's
exactly.
But
he wasn't promised.
Right. And people
go, Vince, on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, people are absolutely right when you say he's not coming here to sit the bench. No, he's not coming here to sit the bench, but he's also not coming here with the promise of being the starter. There's a big difference there. He is a very confident kid who has a track record of winning, and you can go back to everything Brian just said about his stats and all of that, and it's all true, and I'm ecstatic that he's going to be a part of this roster, but he wasn't guaranteed a starting position, and just like when a five-star quarterback comes in as a freshman or commits to a school back to back to back of another 5-star and another 5-star, those guys are confident that they're going to win the starting job and that they're going to play. Those guys aren't signing on to sit the bench. Sam Hartman is not signing on to sit the bench.
Right.
He's signing on because he sees the potential of Notre Dame's team. He knows that a successful Notre Dame team with him at the helm is going to raise his stock.
Yes.
Number one,
go lead Notre Dame to a national championship and see what happens to your stock.
Number one, from a draft potential, because he's going to be running an NFL offense. We've talked about that a bajillion times about how this offense prepares you for the next level. If Ian Book can get drafted in the 4th round, Sam Hartman will get drafted higher if he leads this team into any kind of success. If he's the starting quarterback, he sees that. He also sees that his draft grade right now, mainly because of the offense that he was running, was
his size.
Was third day. Was third
his
day.
Size.
Was third day. He can make more money in NIL at Notre Dame than he can being a third day draft pick in the NFL. This
Potentially,
year.
yeah.
Like this,
and then if he's able to jump his draft stock up even more next
then it
year,
even gets more so. So
right.
The boxes that are checked by Sam Hartman coming to Notre Dame are easy to see from his camp.
Right.
Easy to see. He's going to come and compete for this job. People also need to understand that it was not promised to him. He's going to compete for it, but he thinks he can win
and
it.
That's what
That's
I like.
Awesome. That's great.
What I like.
Yes.
He's willing to compete. You want that. Now, and here's the other flip side of this. I've heard people say, well, this means Tyler Buchner's going to transfer. I don't know if Tyler Buchner's going to transfer or not. I can't, I'm not a fortune teller, but my understanding is Notre Dame has been very upfront with the quarterbacks from day one, which is why Drew Pine transferred. I mean, when Drew Pine left on, December, was it second or third or whatever? Right. Part of the reason was because Notre Dame said, we're going in the portal to get a quarterback. You know who else they told that to? Tyler Buchner.
Correct.
Right. But what they told Tyler is, you're going to get a chance to compete. And they told Drew, you're going to get a chance to compete. Tyler said, okay, cool. Now, could Tyler end up changing his mind if he's not going to start?
Sure.
Maybe. But looking at it from Tyler's standpoint, I hope he stays because, number one, you're going to get a chance to compete. And if you win the job, what's that say about you? But number two, because you only played 3 games this year, he got a red shirt back. He still has 3 years of eligibility left. I don't think sitting behind Sam Hartman is going to be a bad thing for Tyler Buchner. If any, because clean up your mechanics, he's still going to play.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and so, you know, for me, there's all those aspects to it, Vince, that there's a lot of reasons for Tyler Buchner to stay, especially if you like it at Notre Dame. And from what I understand, he does.
Right.
I could understand the temptation to leave.
Me too. Especially
but there's no guarantee. Number one, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to go somewhere and start anywhere else. And you're already now 2.5 years in, so you're close. You're getting closer to your degree. Why not stick it out? Because my understanding, talking to people around the Notre Dame program, is that their hope is that Tyler stays, proves he can stay healthy for a full year. Sam comes in and does his thing. If Sam wins the job, Tyler continues to develop his game and then takes over in 24, and he's got 2 years as a starter.
Right.
But if Tyler beats him out, then he beats him out. And that just means Tyler's ready to go ball. So the point, however, is the competition is going to lead to a greater, we always talk about margins for error, right, Vince? The margin for error at quarterback just got enormously bigger because it's assuming Tyler stays, because you've got now Tyler Buchner and Sam Hartman.
Yes.
So they're going to make each other better.
Absolutely.
And so,
I'm
the
with you.
winner of that job is going to be ready to thrive.
Absolutely, and whoever doesn't win that job is going to be ready to thrive too. Everybody realizes that and this is an extreme example, but everybody realizes, right, that Max Duggan was not the starter going into the year for TCU, right? I mean, he was the backup. He got beat out, and now he's leading his team to a national championship. I realize that's an extreme example, but the point is, you need to have 2 guys that you know can run this offense.
Right.
If you want to be, I mean, will you need it? Probably, maybe not, but probably. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? And so Notre Dame, in a perfect world, whoever wins the job, they have both of these guys on the roster and you're ready to roll. Right. So there's nothing negative about this in any way. And the fact that Tyler Buchner needs to compete for the job, the fact that Sam needs to compete for the job, is going to make both of them
Right.
better quarterbacks.
Well, and the thing is if Tyler doesn't want to stay, I understand it, but that kind of tells you something too, right? I mean, Drew
Absolutely.
Pine not staying kind of told me a little something.
It told me a lot.
You know, Tyler Buchner, if he decides to leave after this year, it tells me something.
Mm-hmm.
It tells me the exact opposite story of why Sam came. Because he knew he had to compete and made the best man win. And this is his last chance. Tyler has 3 years left. So I hope Tyler stays because like Vince, you know, I've never wavered from the if he can be healthy, Tyler Buchner's going to be a really good camp. I've never wavered from that.
I'm there too.
And I still believe that if he can stay healthy, but you can't go into next season with him and Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie, and you're crossing your fingers saying, boy, I hope Tyler can stay healthy again this year.
Right.
Because that's what you did this year. They gambled, turned down some quarterbacks that reached out to them. I was told Keaton Slovis was really wanted to come to Notre Dame. Notre Dame said no. Because they thought Tyler needed and Drew needed the reps to compete in battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Tyler wins the job. There's a lot of excitement about him. He played okay against Ohio State, not good against Marshall, and then gets hurt. And the development is lost.
Gone.
And that's the key.
Right.
So I can assure you the Notre Dame staff is incredibly high on Tyler's talent. And that's why I said to you before, I can say with confidence that Notre Dame would have gone to the transfer portal no matter what this offseason, but they would have done it like last year where they were looking more for a depth guy.
Right.
Not a starter.
Like an Ivy League guy.
Right. Because I think Drew still leaves after this year.
Oh,
he's
fully anticipated
right. Because
Tyler,
if Tyler was the starter the whole year, I think Drew still leaves.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before the season.
Yes.
Get his degree and then go do what you got to do, right?
Right.
But for me, like they would have gone to the portal for a depth guy if Tyler doesn't get hurt. They wouldn't have gone to the portal for a Sam Hartman.
Right.
And if Sam Hartman would have wanted to come after Tyler started the whole year, it's like, dude, you know we've got a quarterback, right? Like you can come, but you're gonna have to be pretty freaking good to beat this kid out. That's how that's how the thought is. Because Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees both, I can tell y'all with a great deal of confidence, they both love Tyler's potential. But getting another season-ending injury kind of forced them into this, right? Because now Tyler's got to go prove, not that he's a good player. They already know that. You got to prove you can stay healthy. You know, like it's just missed his sophomore year with a knee injury, missed his senior year with COVID, not his fault. Missed a game last year with an ankle injury. The game he comes off the bench against Virginia Tech and looks so good, Vince, the reason Jack Cohn came off the bench at the end wasn't because they brought him in to rally the troops. Tyler got hurt. He hurt his ankle.
Right.
Couldn't play. And so, you know, and then of course this year. So that's the thing for me is I hope Tyler stays and learn first, compete, beat him out. Right. And if you don't, what can you learn from him? Because I think Sam Hartman's the ideal quarterback for Tyler Buchner to learn behind.
That's a good call.
Because Sam Hartman is a mobile quarterback. He's not a runner. He's a mobile quarterback.
Right.
The guy's rushed for 17 touchdowns in his career. I think he can help develop the pocket part of what Tyler Buchner can do.
Sure.
Is if the pocket part of what Tyler Buchner can do improves, this kid's going to be unreal. Because we saw in the Gator Bowl, this kid can make some insane plays. It's the little things that Tyler's not good at yet.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Drop back, hit your drop, and hit a freaking wheel route to the running back. Don't throw it at his feet. You know what I mean?
Or right at his face mask at 100 miles an hour.
Right.
You know, and some of that was nerves, but still, your point is
sure
still valid.
We saw that in the game against Marshall. I mean, he can hit a post route for a touchdown when the dude's drilling him in the freaking face. But when Braden Lindsey's running wide open and he has no pressure, he sails it by 8 yards. You know what I mean? Like, it's those things that Tyler still needs to learn. The talent's there. He's a really smart kid. Right. It's just the experience of playing football. And it's not just game experience. Like, here's the thing. Tyler didn't miss game experience. He missed practice experience with all those injuries.
All of it.
Because he hurt his knee. It wasn't like as a sophomore in high school, he was backing up some veteran, and so he was practicing every day, and he was hurt. He couldn't practice. He couldn't develop. Senior year, same thing. Freshman year at Notre Dame, he got a lot of development because he could play. This year, he lost all the development time. And I think those are the things that you look at and say, Well, that's why there's so much optimism in Tyler, because he's a really talented player. But you also can't fault Notre Dame for saying
No.
we can't. We think we have a team that can go compete for a title next year. We need a couple pieces here and there. We really trying to get an impact D lineman, right? Want to get some veteran experience at pass catchers and some depth at safety. But other than that, we're really, like, people said, why aren't they looking at more Vipers? Because they love Jordan Patel, Josh Burnham, Aiden Gobira, Junior Tuihalamaka, those guys. They love all of them. And then you look at, why aren't they recruiting this position? Because they like where they're at there. Right.
That's why they do such a good job recruiting. And it's college. You eventually you have to be able to develop your guys and allow them to fill the holes and not have to go to the transfer portal to fill those holes. I mean,
so they think they can compete for a championship, and you owe it to the rest. Like, somebody said, why don't you just let Buckner play again next year? Maybe go 9-4. And I'm like, that would be maybe the best thing for Tyler Buckner, but that's not the best thing for the other 84 kids on scholarship.
Yeah.
Who, some of them, this is their only chance to compete for a championship in 2020, or their last chance, I should say, to compete for championship in 2023. How's that fair to them?
Right.
Now, if Tyler Buckner wins the job, then great. But if Tyler Buckner beats out Sam Hartman, it's because Tyler Buckner's ready to lead you to a championship.
Right.
That's the reality.
And that's still a win-win scenario.
Correct.
Like, literally win. You're going to win a lot of games with whoever wins this battle.
Correct.
That's the way I see it.
It's a win-win. It really is a win-win. And the thing too is Sam Hartman fits in really well not personality-wise, but like the way he plays the game. Because the one thing about this kid, I watched this kid as like a 175-pound freshman. I actually saw Sam Hartman play live as a freshman against Notre Dame. It was Ian Book's, I think, first career start. First career official. Like,
right, it was his first start as the starter.
Correct. Like the North Carolina game the year before, I don't count. He was filling in for it was an injury start, non-injury start. Right. Was against Sam Hartman.
Right.
This kid was like $175, $180, and the Notre Dame defense was punishing him. He eventually got knocked out, but like that kid kept getting up and kept battling. And you're like, this kid's gonna get killed.
Yeah.
Like, but he kept getting off the mat. And if you watch him his first few years, like, he got thrust into the lineup way too early. Yeah. He just physically wasn't ready.
Right.
But he competed.
Right.
That was the thing. He competed and he can battle. And I think the number of quarterback, like, I wish I could tell you all the names of the quarterbacks that I heard reached out to Notre Dame. I wish I could.
You can tell me later.
Because you guys would be, I know. Yeah, no. You guys would be like, why are all these quarterbacks looking at Notre Dame? Because the perception of Tommy Rees's pass offense is a lot different in football circles
than it is Notre Dame fan circles.
Right? That's just a fact. Now, you could argue with, well, okay, why is that?
Sure.
That's fair, right? But I'm saying schematically,
right?
People look at what he does and they really like it. So, that's kind of where you see it. So I think, they need a level of toughness here.
Absolutely.
And that brings it. Tyler brings it. Drew brought it.
Absolutely.
Look, I'll be critical of certain aspects of Drew Pine's game, but there's certain things I'm going to praise him for too. And the one thing I'm going to praise Drew Pine for, that's a little dude.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not exactly like a, rocked up physique. You know what I'm saying, Vince?
We heard about that too.
But you know what?
Jersey, the spare
he took a beating and he kept battling.
Yeah.
And Tyler's that way.
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks, Vince, that were highly ranked recruits that they don't even try to play in that bowl game.
Right.
Like, dude, I need to recover. I need to make sure I'm healthy. And as soon as Tyler was cleared, he was like, I'm playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
And
he took some shots.
And he did not change how he plays at all. He slid a couple times or dipped out of bounds a couple times. That's it.
Okay.
But he was
that's
like,
what he should do. I have no problem
exactly.
with that.
But what I'm saying is he didn't change the way he played at all.
No.
He's like, hey, if I got to take this shot to get this ball out, then I got to get this ball out. And that says a lot about the kid. So I'm excited. The reason I'm excited about this is, number one, as I've done more film homework on Sam Hartman, I really like the fit at Notre Dame.
Sure.
A lot better than I thought I would. I'm just being honest. I was not high on this. I even said, there was a guy on Facebook one time that was talking about Sam Hartman like a little while ago, and gave like 4 reasons why. And I responded with like, number 1, system quarterback. Number 2, system quarterback. Number 3, I'll admit that. I'll own that, right? Because that's what he was to me. But as you dive into the film, you see a kid that really brings some stuff to the table, Vince. Yeah.
I'm pumped.
Yeah.
Again.
But my point was, the reason I'm excited, Vince, is because I've really come to like this kid a lot.
Sure.
But him coming in to me greatly enhances the chances you're going to have a big time quarterback next year, because it's either going to be him
Exactly. That's what.
and because here's the, if it's him, he has to beat out Tyler Buckner
right
to win the job. That's not going to be an easy thing to do.
Exactly.
Number two, if it's Tyler, it means Tyler has to beat Sam out. So however that battle goes, as long as they both battle, I mean, I feel like, okay, you just ensured that you're going to have a really, really good quarterback.
Yes. For the first time in a while, I have felt really good about the quarterback position at Notre Dame. And that is not only whoever's going to start, but whoever is the backup too. Because you're not going into games like, oh my God, he can't get hurt. He can't get hurt. Like, if he gets hurt, our season is garbage. Like, that is not my thought process. My thought process is they're good to go no matter who it's going to be, whether it's one, whether it's two, and whoever those 1 and 2 are. I feel good about where Notre Dame is. You're right. The margin of error is like huge right now.
Right.
It's huge because there's so much margin right now for the way that I know that both of these guys can play moving forward. And on top of that, at the pieces that are around them on the offense.
Yeah.
Running back room, the offensive line, the tight end room, the way the wide receivers are getting better with every snap, and the new guys that are coming in, Caleb Smith that's coming in from Virginia Tech, like all of the pieces on the offense, I'm feeling really good about right now. Now, it all has to come together, obviously.
What did Caleb Smith do? What did Caleb Smith do well? What's about the only thing he did at Virginia Tech? Run down the field.
Deep.
And what's Tobias Merriweather going to be good at? What's Deion Colesy going to be good at? This is the kind of quarterback that can make those plays. I think Tyler is too, right? But this is kind of what we're adding on to, is that you're bringing in these guys that can do those things. And that's kind of what gets you fired up, Vince. So, this is – it's like going through the whole thing. You're like, dude, this guy needs to make this announcement because I'm running out of stuff to say about the offense and about quarterback and stuff like that. So it's like, that's what's like, Vince, can you please add to this?
I was like, I don't. Vince said everything. I don't know what else. I don't know what else. I don't know what else.
Stop freaking agreeing. Make up an argument if you need to. I need time. He hasn't committed yet. We need time. So yeah. Big day for Notre Dame, right? Now they're not done in the portal, Vince. I mean, there's a lot of dudes they're gonna make a run at.
News.
We had some intel drop last night about some guys that are on the board from Notre Dame. There's a couple guys whose names I couldn't share that are, some of them could be guys that could be difference makers, some just depth guys. But yeah, they're not done yet, right? I mean, this is I think the first skill player that they've added, right? The others were kickers and punters and stuff. I think the other two transfer guys were
Caleb Smith.
That's right.
Skill guy, but other than that.
But yeah, it just, this is good, right? What's funny for me is I even had somebody say, well, the competition is going to be a lot different at Notre Dame than it is Wake Forest. I'm like, dude, half the schedule is going to be exactly what he was playing at Wake Forest. What are you talking about?
ACC schedule.
Like, half their schedule is a freaking ACC conference. What are you talking about? But I mean, that's
awesome. That's awesome. And I will also say there's some people like, he's Ian Book 2.0 and he's this and he's that. It's like,
is 2.0 mean that's better?
It means he's the same guy, basically. Okay. I mean, he's not the same guy. He's not. You put Ian Book on Wake Forest.
They're very different players.
He is not the ACC leader in touchdowns for his career.
No. Plain
and simple. Okay.
No.
So everybody needs to take a step back on that one.
No, I mean they're very different players. Like Sam is mobile. He's not the athlete or the runner that Ian was.
Sure.
Ian had really nice velocity on like 15 and under stuff, but he was not much of a gunslinger. Like Ian was a very high percentage passer, meaning he was not going to take many chances as a quarterback. This kid takes a ton of chances, meaning sometimes you're like, hey man, we'll need you to make that throw.
Right.
On 3rd and 12, make that throw. On 1st and 10, we'll need you to make that throw. Take the check down. There's going to be an element of that there. The other thing too is like here's the thing that's going to be unique for Sam Hartman is we talked a lot about the Notre Dame defense at the beginning of the show, right? And it's one of those things where it's not as good as it needs to be, but it's going to be much better than what he's had at Wake Forest.
Correct.
And so you don't need to go out there. You're not going to get in a whole lot of 51-45 shootouts with Clemson, with this defense, right? You're not going to have to get into 59 to 58, 55 shootouts against North Carolina, right? And so those are the things you look at and say, there's going to be a lot less pressure on him to have to go out there and score 40 every game to win because he's got a better team around him. Much better run game than what he dealt with at Wake Forest, that he had at Wake Forest the last couple of years. Now, he's had good receivers. A.T. Perry's a good football player. He's had really good receivers to throw to in recent years. But the rest of the package Vince, Wake Forest this year gave up 28.3 points per game.
Right.
Last year, they gave up 28.9 points per game and won 11 games last year, Vince. Like, think about that. Like, this kid was quarterback of a team that scored 55 points and lost last year at Wake Forest.
That's true.
He had won 40, you're talking about a kid that at Wake Forest, won 11 games last year and did so with a team that gave up 28.9 points per game. They gave up 32.8 in 2020 when he was a starter. Again, he only started 9 games that year because he only played 9 games. Wake Forest went 4-5 that year. They lost a game 53-59. They lost another game 42-45. He's not going to be losing games like that in Notre Dame.
Right, exactly.
You score 42 points a game in Notre Dame, you're not going to lose to hardly anybody, if anybody, So those are the things that it's still weird looking at those COVID years. Like the attendance for the Clemson game was 68. Attendance for the NC State game was 350. It's just really weird looking at those. But yeah, those are funny numbers. But that's the thing is like it makes a lot of sense why this kid's making this run. I mean, you look at Wake Forest this year; they averaged 131 rushing yards per game.
Notre Dame's not averaging 130.
Last year, they averaged a whopping 160 at 3.98 per carry. The year before that, 163, 3.9 yards a carry. All right. And 2021, they scored 31 touchdowns. Sam Hartman had 11 of them. I mean, they're you know what I mean? Like he's going to have such a better group around him, Vince. And that's the thing that I think is going to be really important for him. And here's another thing. Wake Forest this year ranked 105th in sacks allowed this season. They ranked 92nd the year before. They ranked 105th the year before that. They've ranked 92nd or worse every year that he's been the starting quarterback at Wake Forest, or at least the last 3 years. And so, and it's system. Actually, every year because he started 9 games in 2018 and they were 96th. So to me, like that's why he came here. I want to play in a pro-style 100%. System, not this mesh crap. Because I've had people ask, this is a fair question. Will Notre Dame try to adopt some of the mesh stuff? No. If they did, Sam would be pissed. Like, dude, I left that. I wanted to get away from that. Why are we running this now? Yeah, those are the reasons that went into why this was an attractive option for him.
Right.
Even though there was other schools, here's the deal. Other schools offered him a spot to come in and start, no questions asked. I know that for a fact. There were other schools that said, hey, you don't have to come here and compete. But Sam was like, no, I'm looking for something. I want to compete for a championship, and I want to play in a system that's going to allow me to develop as a quarterback. And that's what Notre Dame does.
Absolutely.
So I think they certainly give him that. So Vince, we're gonna wrap this up and then go to the mailbag because we have a lot of mailbag questions. So if you want to kind of go through and start starring a lot of those, or actually you can start reading them and then I'll start kind of going through and starring because I know we got the
perfect
super chats, but I want to get to the others. But before we get to the mailbag, everybody, do us a favor. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. We're not going anywhere. We're going to have a lot more stuff. We'll talk about the Sam Hartman aspects that you want to talk about when we get to the mailbag, as opposed to just us continue to ramble on and on about the things that we're excited about. Let's hear from you guys about what you want to talk about, some of the other questions. So Vince, that's what we'll kind of do next. But we do ask that you hit that like button, subscribe to the message board at boards@irishbreakdown.com. If you're listening via podcast app, please give us a 5-star review on the Irish Breakdown podcast app. And if you also, we would appreciate it if you could sign up or subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast as well. It is mailbag time, and we're going to get into some of these questions here. We do have some super chats. Sean Ryan says, let's go Driscoll. Vince can kick rocks, though. I don't know what that beef is about, Sean.
I don't even
What's
know
up
who
with
Sean
that?
is. I don't know how that
That's
works, but he was getting a lot of pushback from people in the chat, so I
yeah,
appreciate
Vince is my guy,
everybody
man.
on that. I'm not sure
I
I'm not
mean,
sure what I did to you, Sean.
yeah, what's up with that, Sean?
It's
That's
rough.
this. You know, I'm not even gonna thank you for the super chat, man. You took a shot at my dude, man.
You even got all caps. Like, you got
That's
all
hurtful.
caps, and I
It's
got
hurtful. I
nothing.
mean, I'm glad that you love me and
It is
everything,
what
but
it
you
is.
know,
It is
come on,
what it
Vince. What
is.
did Vince do to you?
I don't know.
ICURN with Irish Luck asks, or actually, Vince, you go ahead and just do the super chats first, and then we'll get to the rest.
I'll
And then
hang in the start
I'll go.
area and we'll go from there. All right. ICURN with Irish Luck. I like that name. Thanks for the super chat. How do you compare Hartman and Sam Howell from play style?
It's a good question. That's a very good question.
It is a good question.
So Sam is last year. Sam was more of a runner than Sam Hartman. Sam Howell was more of a
two Sams.
runner
It's going to be hard.
than Sam Howell. Like Sam Hartman's never going to have the kind of game that Sam Howell had against Notre Dame as a runner. Like I don't see that. Like here's what Sam Hartman can do as a runner. He can pull and get around on the outside on read zone. Like the run where Tyler Buckner had where they ran inside zone and they pulled two guys around and he just kept it and ran for 20 yards. Sam Hartman can do all that stuff. He could even run the occasional quarterback draw on third down if you need him to, but he's not a guy you're going to run Q power, things like that with a whole bunch. That's just, he's more of a scrambler and, that kind of thing. He's not a runner per se. He's mobile, but he's not a runner. Sam Howell was thicker. Sam Howell was a shorter, thicker kid.
Yeah.
I think that Sam Hartman threw a beautiful deep ball. And Sam Howell throws a beautiful deep ball. That's two things they have in common, in my opinion, is their ability to throw the deep ball very effectively. But I think Sam Hartman is a little bit more accurate throwing the ball down the field than Sam Howell, which is it's getting very confusing. Me constantly saying Sam Hartman, Sam Howell, Sam Hartman, Sam Howell.
So close, so close.
But Sam Hartman, to me, throws a little bit more accurate deep ball. Sam Howell's was pretty though, man. Like he threw a really pretty deep ball. But I think Sam Howell threw with a little bit more velocity than Sam Hartman, but Sam Hartman has a cleaner and quicker release than Sam Howell, which to me is one of those things that I think is going to lead to a little bit more success in the Notre Dame offense. Like Sam Howell threw a really pretty deep ball, but in his last year at Wake Forest, at North Carolina, he only completed 32.4% of them. And, and then in 2020, he was a little bit better, but not 46.7, completed 28 of 60. And that's the thing. So he completed a little in the 40s in 2 years, his last year's combined. Sam Hartman did that in 2021 alone. And he almost got to that number in 2022 alone. So a lot more experience on the deep ball and a lot more effectiveness on the deep ball from a touchdown standpoint for sure. But I think those are the areas where I think that you'll see them be very similar, in my opinion, Vince. So there's some carryover there. There's some differences, but there's also some carryover that you look at and say, yeah, I mean, there's similar quarterbacks to compare each other to. There's no doubt about it. And I think one thing that Sam Hartman's going to have to do is get a little better about. I'm curious to see how quickly he can adapt to throwing against pressure from a more drop back type of system, because he's had to throw a lot of weird throws and throw pressure with guys in his face because that mesh takes him all the way down to the line of scrimmage. Well, not only that, but it takes him to the line,
and the line comes to him. I mean that's what happens, because the line is going to give ground, especially when they're doing that mesh, and so the line's giving ground at times, and
the line's giving ground, and
coming to him.
Forward.
He's going towards it.
Right.
It's just I don't understand the offense, but whatever.
Right. When this year at Wake Forest, when he had a clean pocket, his passing numbers, he completed 68.1% of his throws, 2,969 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt, 30 touchdowns, and 7 picks. So when he was given a clean pocket, he was pretty good, Vince. He was pretty good. And so I think those are things that you look at and say, hey, this is Notre Dame this past year, for example. Drew Pine completed 18.1. Averaged 8.1%, or good Lord. He averaged 8.1 yards per attempt on throws where he's kept clean. Sam Hartman was a 9.3. So certainly better. And honestly, I think at times Sam Hartman was even better last year. Because he just, I don't know what it was. I don't know if the missing time with the heart thing kind of threw off their timing. The offensive line was really bad this year. I think that hurt as well. had a little better supporting cast last year. But you look at his numbers last year, Vince. I mean, he completed 58.9% of his throws. He had 22 drop passes last year. That's a lot. So you take those away, and all of a sudden his numbers go way up. But I think this team will catch more balls than that one did, in my opinion.
Tyler Evans with the super chat. Let's say Sam Hartman wins the starting job at 23 schedule. What games do we have the quarterback edge over teams we play? And he hopes Tyler Buchner stays.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone should hope that Tyler Buchner stays. I mean, everyone should hope that, because Tyler Buchner's a really talented quarterback, and if he's the starting quarterback at Notre Dame again, he's going to win a lot of games, in my opinion, as long as he can stay healthy.
I think Notre Dame has the quarterback edge regardless of who the starter is. Even if it's let's say Sam Hartman, because that's the premise of the question. I think Notre Dame has the quarterback edge in all the games except USC.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Navy, yes. Tennessee State, yes. Central Michigan, yes. Ohio State, potentially. Like, Kyle McCord is very inexperienced, but Kyle McCord is really talented. So I would say if Sam Hartman's a quarterback, Ohio State will have the more talented quarterback. Will he be better? That's the question.
Right. And we'll be 3 or 4 games in at that point. We'll be able to decide.
Better doesn't always mean more talented. Better means who's more effective.
Quarterback
That's going to
depend. Right.
That's going to depend on how quickly Kyle McCord gets up to speed.
Right.
So, but, they'll have Clemson should be better. Notre Dame should be better than Clemson. Stanford, definitely yes. Louisville, definitely yes. NC State, definitely yes. Pitt, definitely yes. Just because I don't know what to expect from Phil Dracovic at this point in time. I mean, he's just been beat up so much in his career. I don't know what to expect from him, but potentially there. And then the other one that we're not talking about that needs to be discussed a little bit is the kid at Duke was pretty good this year. He wasn't as good as Sam Hartman was, and he wasn't as good as what Tyler Buchner can be, but he's pretty good. How's he going to be in his second year running that offense? But then it's sort of like, but you're asking him, can he make a jump? He's got to make a jump to be better than Sam Hartman.
Sure.
So to your point, Vince, the only school that I can say right now for sure, right now, that's going to have a better quarterback than Notre Dame is USC. But the gap just closed enormously from where it was when they played this year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's
all right. Next up, Joe Medina with the super chat. Thank you very much. Will top-tier quarterback recruits begin to view Reese as a guy who is incapable of developing homegrown quarterbacks if another transfer 2 times in 3 years is Notre Dame's starter?
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, look, do those kids? Does Lincoln Riley get that reputation? And Lincoln Riley's first 2 big-time quarterbacks were both transfers.
Right.
They weren't homegrown.
Right.
They weren't guys he recruited. Now, Caleb Williams is homegrown. I'll give him that because, yes, he transferred to USC, but he transferred to USC from Oklahoma with him, right? But Jalen Hurts was a transfer. So did that scare off Caleb Williams? Or did it say, hey, this guy's really good at taking talented quarterbacks and producing really big-time offenses? That's what kids are going to care about. The kids aren't going to care about that they had to go to a starter. A transfer. They're going to care about how did that transfer play. That's what they're going to care about. If Sam Hartman comes here and puts up numbers and Notre Dame wins a bunch of games, quarterbacks will be like, hey, dude, that offense is a place I can go put up some numbers.
That's what they look at. The offense.
Are you worried about them taking a transfer? No, because I'm not that dude. I'm not Drew Pine.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And again, why did they take a guy? Well, Tyler Buchner got hurt. That's why they, it's the spin, but sometimes spin is, well, that's actually what happened. That's the truth.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's kind of I view it. So honestly, the question's fair. I mean, I get it. I think it's a very fair question. I just don't think it's going to matter if they produce. Now, if the transfer comes in and doesn't produce, then that conversation I think starts becoming like you went with a transfer guy over your guy, and that's what you got. Like, really, your developed guys couldn't do any better than that. I think that's where you start seeing a problem, Joe.
Sure.
So fair question, but it just depends on the production. If the production's there, then recruits aren't going to care. And if recruits are bothered by it, you know who is going to like it? The next transfer quarterback. He's like, dude, did you see what Sam Hartman did last year?
Right. Yeah, true.
And that's what happened with Lincoln Riley.
Yeah.
It's like, well, have you seen what that guy does with offenses?
Yeah.
So, it's got to produce. That's the key. The production's got to be there. If the production's there, Joe, then I think it'll be good. It'll be a good selling point for Notre Dame. That's what they're going to care about.
Yep, absolutely. Next super chat, ICURN with the Irish Luck. Second super chat, thank you very much. I like that A.T. Perry and Hartman were able to do at Wake Forest, but a Hartman Dion / Tobias combination should make you salivate.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, see, he had a couple good receivers at Wake Forest this year. I actually really like Wake Forest receiving core. But if you look at it, Vince, it's a lot like Notre Dame's. I mean, it really is. If you look at the guys they have, you got A.T. Perry, 6'5", 205. He's a very Deion Colsey-ish, Tobias Merriweather-ish type of player.
Similar, yeah.
Right? You've got Jamal Banks, who's 6'4", 208. He had 42 catches for 636 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's more of a Deion Colsey type, where A.T. Perry is more of a Tobias Merriweather type. So you look at Donovan Green, 6'2", 210, did a lot of damage from the slot. Who's that remind you of? Jaden Thomas, right? And and then you've got Taylor Morin, who's a short, quick guy. Okay, I don't know who that would be. The running backs maybe, right? But there's a lot of similarities between Notre Dame has a lot of what they have, and so I'm with you on that. But I think that's partly why you are attracted to this guys, because you're going to be taking more one-on-one shots next year. Now the receivers got to do a better job of making plays on those balls.
Absolutely.
Deion did a bad job on his one.
And that 50-50 ball.
Yeah, he let that right him out of bounds and then didn't make a play on the ball. But he'll get better at it.
Yeah.
So those are the things you look at and say, boy, if you can get him connecting deep down the field with those guys. I mean, and here's the thing is you're going to be doing that he was doing that against teams that knew they were throwing the football. That's the thing is it's not apples to apples when you talk about the offense he played in compared to Notre Dame. He was taking those shots against teams that were dropping 7 guys into coverage and dropping 8 guys into coverage. At Notre Dame, he's doing that with a lot of one-on-ones because their teams are still going to be like, hey, dude, we still got to figure out a freaking way to stop Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, and Chris Tyree, and Jadarian Price, and Jeremiah Love, and this offensive line.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so then all of a sudden you're putting 8 in the box, and Sam Hartman's running a play-action fake, and he's taking a one-on-one shot, and he's putting it on the dime.
And this is a kid smiling the whole time. I mean,
this is not a kid that's going to be afraid to.
Right.
Please don't take this as a shot at Drew. He was a young kid. He was first-year starter. Maybe Sam makes the same mistake when he was the same age. But where Sam is now, when they're playing USC, and you run that play where he got intercepted, what was it, 30? What was the score at that time, Vince? It was 31-20, right? But there was a good amount of time left, and Notre Dame go down and score. It's a ball game. You get one stop, you got a chance to win it. And on that play that got intercepted, they had and Drew had played really well for them, except that one turnover up to that point in time in the game, right? But the mistake you made was you had Deion Colsey open in that cover 2 hole, and Drew was just unwilling to make that throw.
Right, he was wide.
He scrambles around and throws across his body. Sam Hartman's drilling that 2-hole throw.
Yep, absolutely.
And how do I know that? Because I've seen him do it 100 times.
Right.
A little bit hyperbolic with that, but I've seen him do it a bunch of times, right? He sees he sees Braden Lindsey with a step on a defender like we saw a million times this year. He's throwing that sucker. He doesn't need to wait and be like, I don't know if he's open yet. He's going to do what Tyler did in the bowl game, which is I know where he's supposed to be. I got to get this ball out. I trust my guy to go make a play. So those are the things where you start to get excited about it. But for Sam's part, you're going to get a lot more one-on-one looks this year at Notre Dame if you win the job than what you ever saw at Wake Forest, because this team's going to run the football, and they're not going away from that. They're not going to turn into this spread it out, throw for 5,000 yards, never running the football team. No, that's not what they sold to Sam. You're going to come in here. We need you to be super efficient. We need you to get the ball down the field, get the ball to the playmakers. We're going to protect you with our line. We're going to protect you with the run game. So instead of at Wake Forest, you look at his passing numbers, Vince, right? So this year he threw 428 passes. You look at his pass attempts, 33, 27, 44 against 29, 34, 22, 40, 44, 48, 31, 43, 42, 36. Those aren't the numbers they're going to want him to have. The numbers they're going to want him to have are like the numbers he had against Clemson. 20 of 29, 337 yards and 6 touchdowns. 6 touchdowns as much. Okay, so 20 of 29 for 295 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's what they're going to want from him. And that's where if Notre Dame's doing that because they're efficient, high yards per attempt, high completion percentage, taking your shots when they're there, just like he did against Clemson, and they're running the ball the way the Notre Dame's going to run the ball, how do you stop that? What would Sam Hartman have done to Navy? Second half, they're trying to bring all those pressures. He's done. right? He would have you'd had a better shot beating Ohio State. Now, would you have beat Ohio State? I don't know. I'm just saying you'd have had a little better shot winning that game. You don't lose to Stanford. You don't lose to Marshall. I mean, just look at this particular team. You're at worst 10-2 with Sam Hartman at quarterback. I think you're 11-1, maybe at 12-0 with this team. The way the schedule played out, maybe I'd say probably 11-1, 10-2 is more likely.
Sure.
Would you agree with that, Vince?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair
because there were some other issues on the team. You couldn't run the
Right.
ball early,
Right.
your defense, and all that kind of stuff. But you're 10-2 at worst. Next year's team, 2 of the 3 teams that you probably lose to this year, if you go 10-2, you're getting home next year.
Exactly.
And 2 of those 3 aren't going to have their quarterback from this year back. And it really hurts Ohio State because I love Kyle McCord's talent, but he's not going to be C.J. Stroud by game 4.
Exactly.
With all due respect.
Yeah, no.
So, it's going to be a battle, but it's just like you look and say, boy, that's a more manageable game. So they're going to be a much more balanced team, and Notre Dame's not going to be an easy team to beat if they can, if Sam can translate into the offense the way that I think he is. Again, that's what we're working with, that assumption that he can make that. It's not a guarantee he's going to make that assumption. It's not a guarantee he's going to beat out Tyler Buchner. I'll say this, though. Sam Hartman, I'm going to say this, Vince, and I want to get your opinion on this. You can take down that super chat because this is not necessarily related to that. I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to ask people in the chat to tell me if they agree or disagree with this.
All right.
The excitement here about Sam Hartman is Sam Hartman raises the floor enormously for Notre Dame's offense and team next year. Raises the floor enormously. That's why I'm fired up about that. The reason I really want Tyler Buchner to stay is because if Tyler beats out Sam Hartman, he raises the ceiling even higher because he's so dynamic that if he can play efficient enough football to then win the job, because Tyler Buchner's going to beat out Sam Hartman because he's dynamic. He's going to beat out Sam Hartman because he proves he can also be efficient and do the simple things and lead the offense and manage the offense the way that a veteran quarterback can. If he can do that, the ceiling is greater and they don't lose a game next year if Tyler Buchner beats out Sam Hartman. Because because of what it's going to mean about how his game is improved. Now, what I'm not saying is if Sam doesn't come and Tyler stays and he's your starter, you're going to go 12-0 next year. I'm not saying that because Tyler would have been the starter kind of by default. Who's going to beat him out?
By default.
What I'm saying is if Tyler is good enough and makes the improvements to beat Sam out, that means he's finally tapped into his 5-star potential.
And that means he's better at what Sam Hartman is really good at. Right. He got better.
Or he's at least gotten.
Or is he at least even, and then you add the dynamic.
Even if it's like right here.
And it makes him better.
Bingo.
Yeah,
Bingo.
Completely agree with that. Right. And that's why I pray that Tyler Buchner doesn't go anywhere, and I hope that he sticks this out. And I have no reason to believe that he's not. Okay, I'm not hinting around at anything. I'm not beating around the bush.
We're just being realistic to when kids get brought in, right?
And the way the world is right now in college football, it's just incredibly easy to cut bait and leave.
Right.
It just is, right? I hope he sticks around because however this thing plays out, even if he has to sit behind Sam for a year, I think the learning will be invaluable for him for what then he can do in 24 and potentially 25. But if he does beat out Sam Hartman for this job, if he does, and that's an if right now, we don't know how this thing is going to go, then I agree with you wholeheartedly. Not only has the floor been raised incredibly high because of Sam Hartman coming in, the ceiling will be even higher with Tyler Buchner because he is a more dynamic quarterback than Sam Hartman is. He just from a potential
than most
standpoint.
Quarterbacks are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so enamored with him in the first place and what he's able to bring to the table. And we saw what he can do dynamically in the game in the Gator Bowl. It's one game. It's in a vacuum. I get it. He's going to have to be able to do that in every game. And on top of that, not have the turnovers and all of that. I get all of that. I'm not saying that he's ready to be that guy right now.
Right. That's why we're saying it was important to bring in Sam Hartman because Sam Hartman sets the floor.
Yes.
And if Tyler Buchner can't get to that floor, then you can't start him.
Absolutely. But if you don't bring in Sam Hartman, he is the starter moving forward.
There's no way Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchie beat out Tyler Buchner.
No.
It only way this happens if he gets hurt. I mean, that's it.
Absolutely. And then we're having a completely different conversation.
And but what you don't know from that version, number one, does Tyler get pushed the same way that he will battling Sam Hartman? No, he wouldn't.
No,
he's clearly the best quarterback in the room if Sam Hartman doesn't come.
Correct.
So does he develop the way he needs to?
Right.
We don't know.
Right.
Is he ready to be that efficient guy? Because what I can promise you is if Tyler Buchner was a 12-game starter next year, there'd be some games you're like, dude, if he plays like this every week, nobody beats this team.
Undefeated.
But then he's going to have weeks you're like, dude, how did that game happen?
Right.
Like, what was that?
Right.
And
I agree. Completely.
You don't know but if he's good enough to beat out Sam Hartman, you know that at least you feel comfortable, but those games aren't there anymore because he would have had to develop the efficiency needed to be the starter.
Right.
The playmaking ability is obvious. It's always been obvious.
Right.
And it was even more obvious in the bowl game because we
Yes.
hadn't really seen him be that as the starter.
Right.
Right. And he finally showed as a starter, he can make those
Yeah.
insane plays
Right.
that he made in high school. And that he showed that he can do what to SEC teams what he did in high school. Because that was always the knock, right? Well, he did that stuff in high school against terrible competition. Okay, cool. But he just did it against an SEC team. Not an elite SEC team. But hey, I keep being told that SEC's 8 teams deep every year.
Right.
Well, I mean.
And they're better than the competition he was facing as a junior in high school.
Right.
So,
clearly.
I mean,
clearly.
Can we just can we at least agree on that? For the love
Right.
of all that's good. Okay.
Right.
Here we go. Next up, Jordan. For the mailbag, knowing that Notre Dame is pushing hard for that elite portal transfer, does that give you more hope that Marcus Freeman is paying attention to Al Washington? Do you think Marcus Freeman has taken over the D-line portal recruiting?
No, I don't think he has. I think he needs to, but I don't think he has, at least not yet. He needs to because I'm just not leaving any recruiting right now up to Al Washington.
That's fair. Recruiting. That's fair. And we know that Marcus Freeman has his hand in all the recruiting, but I think he needs to have a heavier hand in the defensive line recruiting at the moment.
Big time.
I think that's fair.
Big time.
Jordan's got another question here. He says, do you think it's a possibility that Marcus Freeman could let go of Al Golden, hopefully back to the NFL, and then take the reins on as defensive coordinator himself, like Jimbo did for the offense in his career?
I highly doubt that. I mean, look, I'm not opposed to that. I've said that in the past.
We've talked about it.
That would have been my preference, honestly, based on some of the options that were on the table. But I don't think he has any interest in doing that, honestly. And I'm okay with that. The one thing I would challenge him to do, I would really want to challenge him to consider coaching the linebackers. Hiring a GA that can take over some of those duties in certain parts of practice. So that you and having a defensive coordinator that can maybe take over them in certain parts of practice, maybe. So you can then go make sure you're checking on the offense and the special teams and all that kind of stuff. But I would at least consider that because Nick Saban coached corners for a long time at Alabama. But
he's not doing it now, but yes, he did. I agree.
Right. But that's the only thing I would consider. I think that ship has kind of sailed a little bit on that. I think there's good defensive coordinators out there, and I don't think we should quite necessarily give up on Al Golden yet. I mean, it's 1 year. It wasn't like it was horrible. It just wasn't as good as it's been in the past. It was still a top 30-ish defense, in my opinion.
It was.
It just wasn't as good as it needed to be or could have been and that kind of thing. But it's not like I've heard people compare him to Brian McGorder. I'm like, that's just insane. Like Brian McGorder was one of the worst football coaches I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Al Golden's issue this year is he wasn't as good as Clark Lee, Mike Elko, and Marcus Freeman.
Right.
That's the knock on him.
Sure.
But, like you said, Notre Dame still had the number 32 defense in the country in the efficiency standpoint. That's not terrible.
It's not terrible.
It's not good enough.
Good enough. Exactly.
Right.
And that was the argument we had last night. Like,
and that was in year one after not having been a coordinator in 20 years. So let's give the guy a chance
especially in college,
to grow and develop. And now he's got to show that he's willing to make changes, as every coach should.
Right.
But again, this guy's not a bum, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on firing him. I know we've got a lot of these questions, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. If that move is made, then we'll discuss it.
Then we'll have that. Yeah.
But I'd rather talk about what Al Golden needs to do a better job of moving forward as a coach and a recruiter. That's important.
All right. Next up, Leighton Borkholder. I was listening to Josh Pate, and apparently he thinks it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Tyler Buchner will transfer. What is that all about?
I don't know Josh Pate. I've only became aware of Josh Pate recently. I've listened to a couple of shows and he does a good job. He said it seems like everybody knows that. I don't know that. So
I don't know that either.
I'm not going to speak for him because I don't know him, and I'm just not going to speak for him. So I'll let Josh answer that one if somebody wants to ask him. But my understanding is it's not a foregone conclusion that he leaves. Could he leave? Sure, he could. Is it a foregone conclusion like it was said in that clip? Because I saw the clip you're talking about. No, it's not, as far as I know, unless he knows something that I don't and every other person I know knows. Is it a possibility? Sure. I think it's more – no, I'm going to speak for him. I'll let him answer it. I just –
Works for me. Next up from Pasquale. With the ability to get experienced players via the transfer portal, has Notre Dame given their last 4-year scholarship to a high school specialist, kicker, punter, long snapper?
Let's see here.
It's possible. I mean, I was actually somewhat surprised that they went to the portal for a punter and a kicker this offseason. I was, because I thought that they were pretty high on the kid that they brought in, the punter that they brought in, who was a freshman this year.
Mm-hmm.
And, Josh Bryan is a decent kicker. Like, I was surprised they went for both in this offseason. So maybe
Josh Bryan, I kind of understand.
Yeah. He doesn't have a strong leg.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
And he's not super accurate. But the thing about, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's going to be the case, because the thing with Bryce McPherson is Bryce McPherson, no, I don't think that's the case, because I don't think you can guarantee that. I think you're going to go to the portal because you don't have a guy on your roster that you're comfortable with at that time. If there's a high school kid that's really good, then they're going to take that guy, because you can't guarantee me that you're going to get a scholarship kid every year, or a kid who's a scholarship player somewhere else to pay to come to Notre Dame.
Right.
You very much narrow your list. And I don't think that the getting experienced players and getting guys that are productive as experienced players is necessarily the same. I don't think you can look at Blake Groupie and say that his level of production was as good as what we saw from John Sott. Right. So unless Harvard's got a kid every year, which, they've kind of done well with Ivy League punters the last 2 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But kickers wise, I mean, they've gotten kids from state schools. I think you can always rely on that. Spencer Schrader just wanted to go to Notre Dame. You can't rely that there's going to be a kid like that every year. You can find a high school kid that you can have be your kicker for 4 years. I think they'd still rather do that. It's just they haven't seen that guy out there.
There's still a chance for Dylan. I like it. All right, here we go.
I still want to crush your spirit,
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's a New Year's present for me. All right, Nick Lane says, what is Sam Hartman's ceiling and comp? We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but if you want to address it.
I think the ceiling as a team with Sam Hartman is 10-2. The floor is 10-2. I think the ceiling is he's a kid that if other pieces around him get worked out correctly can lead you to the playoff and give you a shot to compete for a championship. I truly believe that. He's not a kid that's going to put a team on his shoulders for an entire year the way that Trevor Lawrence did. But I don't think he needs to do that.
I don't think he does either.
I don't. And so it's like, you got to make plays. We need you to make plays. I need you to run the offense. I need you to be a leader. Right. I need you to, get the ball where it needs to go. Do what Jack Cohn did, but be better at it. Because I think he's got more talent than Jack does, especially mobility-wise alone makes him a better threat than Jack was.
Yeah.
And I loved Jack. You know how excited I was about that. I think Sam Hartman, to me, grades out better. He's a better deep ball thrower. He's better. He's just got more velocity. I think kid can play.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't have that view. Like when Jack went in the portal, I love Jack Cohn immediately because I saw the potential and but Sam Hartman, I was not, because I was the opposite. Not get past.
I was the opposite.
Could not get past that mesh.
Yeah,
could not get past that mesh, and just some of the I watched the Louisville game. That was bad. And I think he had like 8 turnovers in that game as a team. He had like 4 picks in that game. It was rough. So that was part of it too, but I tried to have an open mind about it. The more I had an open mind about it, the more I watched the kid play, the more I realized like this kid fitting into the Notre Dame defense is going to be really good. Like really good.
All right. Tom Spagnolo says, if both sides of the ball reach its potential, which side would you consider to be more dominant and lead us to a national championship?
Let's see. If both sides reach its potential, I actually think the offense has always had better talent than the defense. Almost always has had better talent than their defense. Would you agree with that, Vince? 2018, the offense had way more NFL players on that side of the ball than the defense, in my opinion, like high-level NFL players. 2015, for sure. So, yeah, I've always felt like the defense had more talent, or the offense had more talent. The defense has always been coached better. I think that if the offense reaches its full potential and the defense reaches its full potential, the offense will be the more dominant group, because I think a great offense benefits even more from a great defense than a great defense benefits from a great offense. Sometimes a great offense can actually be some of a hindrance to a great defense.
Because they score too fast and they're on the field too long.
Right.
I mean, right? You know?
Right.
So, yeah,
From
I
a
agree with you.
production standpoint.
No,
yeah.
I agree with you. And, you know, you want to talk about leading to a national championship. I mean, it's kind of a dead horse, but you have to score to win a national championship. And that's been the piece that's missing. And so I feel like if the defense is here, the offense needs to leapfrog the defense into, you know, leading so that they can put those points on the board. And I'm not saying the defense is going to be an afterthought, because you need a defense too, right? You need both sides of the ball, but the storyline is going to be the offense and how they're scoring points and who's scoring those points and what it looks like. So I agree. It's the offense.
Agree.
Our buddy John A1 says it seems the O-line is the position group that requires the most patience when developing talent. But what are other positions that require a lot of patience?
Quarterback. Yeah, that's another one. Safety. Linebacker. And I'd put linebacker ahead of safety.
Okay.
Those are the ones for me that require a lot of patience. The positions that require patience are twofold. Defensive tackle is another one. Unless you're like a dude.
Yeah.
But I say defensive line as a whole. Positions that require kind of big boy size and strength, and positions that require higher level thinking. And that's why safety is that one. That's linebackers like that.
Yeah.
Quarterback. Those are the mental ones.
Corner, wide receiver. You can just kind of go play to a degree.
You can. Now, you always want to. Well, you always want a guy that's like Benjamin Morrison's a very high IQ football player.
Right.
But let's be real. He wasn't a freshman All-American because he's wicked smart.
Right.
He was a freshman All-American because he's wicked smart and really talented. Right? Like there's kids that are wicked smart at the Division III level that would get torched all day at this level because they're just not physically talented enough.
Right.
Right? He's great because he's that combination of really athletic and talented and really smart. And some guys aren't that way.
Right.
And so
agreed.
The great players are both. But to Vince's point, at some positions, Vince, defensive end, if you're just really stupidly talented, you can go play that position.
Sure.
You know, running backs that way.
Yes.
Receivers
that way. Yeah.
Especially now. It wasn't always that way, but it definitely is now.
Yeah, I agree. Milton Fan, our favorite in-house Mishawaka fan, I do believe. What are the differences in skill sets for corner and safety? Are they interchangeable, or are they more specific traits for each one? And my guess is this is in regards to the potential move that we've talked about.
Sure.
Yes, that's my guess as to where this one comes from.
It can be interchangeable. It's more of individual. Some players are interchangeable. I don't think corner and safety are necessarily interchangeable by themselves in all defenses. Now, in some defenses, Vince, that are more cover one, there is some interchangeableness to the positions because you have to cover wherever you line up. I think safety is a position that requires more range, different skill set.
Right.
It doesn't require as much pure speed as corner does. It requires range. Range and speed are not always the same thing.
Correct.
Kyle Hamilton proved that. Kyle Hamilton wasn't fast, but he covered a lot of ground because he was a long strider and he was instinctive.
And he made he took very good angles.
Right.
You know, that's all part of covering ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Safety has to see more. I mean, corner is just kind of like here to here at corner. I mean, you're here to inside, and that's it. Safety kind of has to see everything. There's a lot more communication required from the safety position. You need to be more physical as a safety in every aspect of the game. You got to be more physical tackler. You're going to be lined up against tight ends at time and man coverage. You're going to be taking on running backs more frequently than you will at cornerback. Cornerbacks can't be soft, but Deion Sanders had a Hall of Fame career as someone who never wanted to tackle.
And he wasn't very good at it.
No. But he didn't need to be.
He didn't want to be. He didn't need to be. Agreed. Yeah.
You can't be a great safety and not want to tackle.
Right.
Like, so like that's the physicality aspect of it is different. Deion couldn't be that guy playing cover two because in cover two, you got to be more physical.
Sure.
But of course, if you're playing cover two and you have Deion Sanders at cornerback, you're an idiot as a coach. So you shouldn't
that too. I I don't think you need to be. I don't think your hips need to be quite as fluid at safety as they do at
Correct.
corner.
It's ideal if you can have that,
Of
but yes,
course.
you can get away with it much more so
Yeah.
there. You can get just like you can get away with being a step slower
Right.
at safety than at corner,
Right.
for sure. But are they interchangeable? To a degree.
Yeah.
To a degree. Like safety has to be a guy that can keep everything in front of him. That's why I've always felt. That's why Julian Love has made such a good NFL safety. I've talked to people that like are Giants fans. They're like, "Boy, he's really good. He's really productive." I don't watch him, so this is just kind of repeating what others tell me in all transparency. And they've said, "But he's really good." And I'm like, I'm not surprised, because why was Julian Love so good at Notre Dame? Because it was because the way that they used him in coverage, he kept everything in front of him. That's a really smooth transition to corner.
Yeah.
What they asked Benjamin Morrison to do is not a smooth transition to safety. I mean, I said transition to corner. I meant transition to safety for Julian Love. What Benjamin Morrison does not translate to safety.
Right.
It's pure corner skill. Now, could he play safety? Eventually.
Yeah.
You have to fill out his frame a little bit. I don't want him coming down in the alleys and tackling all day. Kittle's going to get hurt.
Right.
But eventually, maybe.
Yeah.
But no, he's a corner. He's a pure corner.
He's not afraid to get physical,
Right.
which I do love about him.
And so I wouldn't put him at safety.
No, I wouldn't either.
Just like Kyle Hamilton is a really good pure safety. And Harrison Smith, best safety the last 10, 15 years, according to some people.
Yeah.
Would never dream of putting them at corner, ever. Right? So they're not always translatable. They can be. With certain players, they can. Eric Berry was a really good corner early in his career in college before transitioning to safety and became a great safety. Right. He's got a cornerback body, but his skill set was such that he can make that move and be a great player at safety as well. So for some it is.
Charles Parson, is there a player on the roster that can step up and become that impact player for a championship defense?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a lot, Charles. I mean, who will they be? I don't know who will step up, but like Riley Mills could be that guy. Josh Burnham could be that guy. Jordan Patelho could be that guy. Tyson Ford could be that guy if he has a big jump. I think that Jalen Sneed could be that guy. Nolan Ziegler could be that guy. Xavier Watts could be that guy. I mean, there's a lot of talent coming in. And I'm not even getting into the freshman class.
Yeah, as I say,
there's a lot of talent
Drake
coming
Bowen
in.
could be that guy just because of his attitude.
Jaden Osbury, Christian Gray.
There's a lot of guys.
Yeah. But whether they will step up or not, it's a different question.
Right.
But there's the talent is there, certainly.
99.
Aiden Gobira is another one. Sorry. I didn't think about Aiden Gobira is another one.
Yeah.
It's a really talented kid.
99 problems, but BK ain't one. Join the show an hour late. This might have been covered, but what has been going on with Lorenzo Styles? I mean, no disrespect.
We already covered it, man. So sorry, you're too late. No, I'm kidding. We didn't cover it.
We didn't cover it at all. Why couldn't he catch the ball this past season? It was odd.
I think it's just in his head.
Yeah,
I
think too.
Because I was actually told, Vince, and you had mentioned this to me, but I was told by a couple buddies, a good friend of mine gets to go to practices that I don't get access to, or you get access to, or anybody else in the media gets access to. But he would say things like that, like, yeah, Styles really had problems catching the ball. And I had another guy who is a graduate at Notre Dame that's a member of our board who said that Styles had issues catching the ball in practice. And so I just think once it happened, it got in his head, and then his attitude wasn't where it needed to be this year. He didn't handle the need to be the guy very well. I don't think he interacted with his teammates in always the most healthy fashion this year. I just think it just snowballed, but it was all a mental thing, really. Yeah. And that can happen for receivers, just like, Chuck Knobloch's a Gold Glove, all pro second baseman. All of a sudden, he gets the yips.
Oh, he couldn't make the throw from second base.
Yeah. I mean, Rick Ankiel's one of the best up-and-coming prospects in all of Major League Baseball as a pitcher, and then he lost it. It was all in his head.
Yep.
He could go to move to center field and throw a dime from center field to home plate, and the ball doesn't hit the ground or one hops, and you're just like, what a gorgeous throw. But you put him on the mound, and he couldn't do it anymore.
Nope.
And it's mental.
Yes.
It just gets in your head.
I mean, Lorenzo was fighting the football. Like he was fighting the football with his. I mean, it was an issue. Now
it's clear, and it was clearly in his head.
Can he get out of it? It's possible, and I think that's going to be a major thing for Chancey Stuckey moving forward. In this offseason, is can you get Lorenzo Styles back to being the Lorenzo Styles that we saw in the Fiesta Bowl? Can he get back to that? I think he can. But it remains to be seen. He could be really good. He could be really good. It elevates this wide receiver room big time, But it's also possible that he doesn't. That sometimes guys just can't fight that off. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But I think I agree with you 100%. It's definitely mental.
I want to make a comment here, Vince. Can you take that one down real quick?
I
A lot of questions about this kid's getting offered by Notre Dame in the portal. Let me just explain something to you. With a lot of these kids, Notre Dame can't get in the game without an offer. And so if they even want to talk to the kid, they got to throw out an offer if they want to have any shot. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these kids get offered. I know of one player, for example, that I talked with a source with last night that has an offer, but they're like, we're not sure if we take him or not yet. Like, why offer him? Because if we don't even get the chance to get in the game to where we can make a decision whether we want to take him or not. The decision's made for us. And so that's why I say I'll let you guys know on the board if a guy is a legitimate option or not. Otherwise, there's just a lot of kids out there. It's just like high school offers. Not every kid that gets an offer from Notre Dame is a committable one.
It's not a committable offer. Exactly.
Right.
That's the key.
So, like latest one was Andrew Anthony. Is Notre Dame interested in him? I'm sure. Otherwise, they wouldn't have offered him. But, is he a guy that they're going to make a push for? We'll find out. So, yeah.
And when does and I saw this question earlier, when does the portal close as far as
I think it's around the 18th. I think.
Okay.
I think that's it. I could be wrong, but I think it's around. But it's like in the next couple weeks.
Right. I know it's in January. I just didn't know.
And then it opens up again after spring ball.
Right. So things will settle down at a little, middle of January.
Thank goodness.
I know, right? That's kind of why I was asking you, but that's, All right. Tommy Guns jumping in says, speaking of Botelho, how is his offseason going so far? Well, the offseason's been a week.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, they're not even a week. They're not even a week
I was gonna say
after the season. Like, I don't know. He's out in Hawaii. I'll fly out there and see how he's doing.
Are his off the field issues fully behind him now?
I don't think you can ever assume that they're fully behind him.
Yeah, I think that's fair
you hope so. You hope he's grown up a lot, right? And he was on the team the whole year. That's a win for him.
Right.
He wasn't suspended at all this year like he was last year. It's a win for him. I hope that they are, Vince, because
we saw
the thing is we've never said the kid's not good.
Right.
The kid's always had ability. It's just, could he keep his head on straight?
Mm-hmm.
That was the question. And so, I mean, until that happens, you got to be excited about what he can bring to the table. You're always nervous that is this the day that he does something that's going to make him not be able to be part of the team anymore. Right. I haven't heard any of that in a little while. So hopefully that's good, but I hope it means that. But he's one of those kids that I'm never going to fully say, hey, boy, this kid's just,
he's got it.
I got no concerns anymore.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's fair.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to say that comparison because that would be unfair. Jeremy
Bonk. Does Thomas Harper have a chance to come over from Oklahoma State and start next year for Notre Dame?
He's that's a kid that we updated last night on the message board. He's kind of a nickel safety kind of guy. Does he have a chance to start? Yes. Are they recruiting him necessarily to guarantee a spot? No. Potentially, I think the position he'd have the best chance to play right away, Vince, is the nickel spot.
Okay.
Because I think Notre Dame would like to kind of find more of a safety body at the nickel. Tariq Bracy was so good in that position this year. Right. But at the same time, there was times you couldn't use Tariq because he was just so small. You couldn't use him necessarily all the time against teams that wanted to run the ball more. And so I think Thomas Harper can run. He can really run. And I got a lot more film to do of him as a football player, but the athleticism's there. But he'd be more of a nickel guy that could also play safety. But nickel's where he'd have the best shot immediately to come in and play, and then potentially battle to be also in the safety rotation.
Gotcha.
I think how they're looking for him to kind of come in and compete for that one. But yeah, he'd have a shot to do that. He's not a kid they're bringing in just for depth.
Okay.
He would have a shot to compete.
You ready for an Ohio State question?
Sure.
I know you are. Buddy Archer has a question. He says, reports are that Ryan Day will relinquish play calling duties next year. Who would you hire as the next Ohio State OC, given that info?
I mean, I think you got to go with Brian Hartline. Otherwise, you might lose him. Someone's going to hire Brian Hartline as an offensive coordinator here really soon.
Yeah.
So, and I think at Ohio State, I think it'd be the ideal scenario because you'd still have Ryan Day there to help groom him as an offensive coordinator. And so I'll kind of believe that when I see it. I know he's saying that, but we'll see. We'll see if that actually holds true. I've seen coaches like Ryan Day before that really are confident in their play calling abilities, Vince, that say they're going to do that, and then like by the middle of the second game, I'm like,
it's like,
yeah,
okay.
like coach, either shut up or call the plays. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you can't just be in my ear
Right.
constantly telling me what to call. Either you do it or let me
Right.
do it.
Right.
And yeah,
that's funny. Irish Blooded says playoff teams excluded. Which team would you have really liked to see Notre Dame in a bowl game against? For me, it's Penn State. I think that would have been a really good game.
I think State.
I think we have to take this question as we can't look at bowl like connections and like it's just who would you have rather see? Who would you like to see them play? Because it was very limited when you talk about which bowl Notre Dame was going to go to and then who they were going to be able to play. So
that's a good question. Just Oklahoma, so I could have watched Notre Dame pound them into oblivion. That'd have been fun. Same thing with Oregon. I don't know.
I was gonna say Oregon. I wouldn't have minded that matchup. I think that one would.
I don't. Notre Dame doesn't get a lot of value out of beating Oregon. I don't think
that's fair.
It gives Oregon more credibility than it would give Notre Dame. But it would have been, if they could have pounded them, that'd have been fun to see.
I feel the same way though about, and I realized it's not what we picked, but like I feel the same way about South Carolina. I feel like Notre Dame should have won that game. They did. South Carolina could have gotten a lot more tread out of beating Notre Dame than the other way around. But I think that's the case a lot of times.
I get that, but here's the difference. That's an SEC team, and there's always going to be that part of in these conversations. So
that's fair.
That's kind of how I look at it, honestly, Vince. I mean, who would I have wanted? I mean, honestly, it's hard to say. Other than the playoff teams, I mean, it would have been the spiteful part of me. But there just weren't a lot of great teams that would inspire great, like Tennessee. That would have been one. You know how I feel about playing Tennessee. I'd love to play Tennessee.
Sure,
that'd have been one. I've always wanted to watch Notre Dame and UCLA play a game because to see those, I like when they played in 06. I loved in 07. I loved the gold helmet, the dueling gold helmets, and the dueling blues. But that's just not for. I mean, I think Tennessee probably would be the one for me, Vince, that I'd want to see. Just as a boy, I'd really like to see that matchup against that team and what it would have meant. Now, look, they beat the team that crushed Tennessee.
That's true,
right? Tennessee was still ranked 7th or 6th in the rankings, and it still would have been a better in that regard. But that'd probably be my pick.
I think, and this is going to sound petty, and I don't care, and I know it would never happen, but I would have loved to see a rematch with USC with Tyler Buckner at the helm. I think that would have been fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd have been a good one.
And again, I realize that would never happen. They're not going to put a rematch. It just happened 2 weeks.
I mean, if the fits were, if the bowl connections were right, sure. But yeah,
that would have been fun for me. But
yeah.
So, all right. Archer's back in the batter's box here. Is next year a make or break year for Tommy Rees? Given the talent on offense, got to feel like he makes the take a big jump, or he's looking for a new job in 12 months.
When you take first crack at that, Vince?
I don't think he's on the hot seat like he's going to get fired. Now, if the offense takes a step backwards, with everything that we just talked about over the last 2 hours, and they take a step back, then I think you have to have maybe a tough conversation does happen. But if they take the step forward that we anticipate, then no, his seat is not hot. But if they take a step backwards with the quarterback being where it's at, with the offensive line being where it's at, the running back room where it's at, the elevation of the wide receiver room, then yeah, I think then you have that conversation. But I don't know that he's looking for a job in 12 months unless it's just a bad regression.
It'd have to be a bunch of Stanford games next year.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah,
it would.
Or just a total misuse of the talent.
Yeah.
Like something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Larry O'Donnell, can you do a breakdown video of Sam Hartman's play, specifically centered around his third down play, and how that translates more effectively to what Notre Dame runs on offense?
We will do something like that at some point, but it will be on the message board only. It won't be on a show like this because we can't monetize it.
We can't exactly.
Copyright laws, business model,
fun stuff like that.
Yep.
All right, Irish Blooded with the question: what do you think of the 2 quarterback system next year, and how would you realistically use them both, if at all, next season?
Vince, I'll let you take first crack at this because I know you have very strong feelings on the 2-quarterback system.
I do. I'm 100% against it. I am not a fan of the 2-quarterback system. I don't think that I do subscribe to the theory of you have two, you've got none kind of a situation. Now, I think that Notre Dame did a decent job of working in Tyler Buckner during the Cone year, right? I think that they did a decent job because their skill sets were so different. I don't know that Sam Hartman and Tyler Buckner's skill sets are so different that it gives you a leg up to bring in Tyler Buckner. Now, could he be a red zone thing? Could it be something along those lines? Maybe. But as much as I love Tyler Buckner, if he is beat out for the job, I think you ride Sam Hartman and you give Tyler Buckner opportunities in blowouts and all of that kind of thing. I don't know that I would go to the 2-quarterback system unless there's just a clear and visible difference that I can bring in and have an advantage with Tyler Buckner. And I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah. First of all, I think people saying that there's no chance Tyler Buckner starts this year that's inaccurate.
I absolutely agree with that.
Am I putting my money on that? No, of course not. But trust me, he's going to get a shot to start, and it would not shock me if he beat him out. Tyler Buckner's a really talented kid. Sam Hartman knows it. I disagree with you, Vince, because I think Tyler Buckner's skill set is such that you can find ways to get him on the field. I just feel like his running ability makes it to where even if it's in the red zone, if there's got to be some package that you've got to get. He's too talented of a football player not to find a home for.
That's fair.
And I think one of the things that football as a sport has done a really bad job at is finding ways to get multiple players at quarterback able to go. And you do it at running back, you do it at receiver, you do it at every other position except two, offensive line and quarterback. And offensive line, I somewhat understand because of the timing and all that. And that's part of the reason a quarterback, too. Quarterback's on the same page. And some positions you can overdo a rotation.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of like what Steve Spurrier did, right? Remember that when he had like, who was it? It was Jesse Palmer and who was the other quarterback on that team? Jesse Palmer.
I thought you were going to talk about Tim Tebow and
no. Because see, that worked. I mean, they won a national championship that year. But like, I don't want to point to the anomaly because Tyler Buckner's not Tim Tebow, right? He's not a 240-pound running back,
right,
with the ball in his hands. But like, what I'm trying to remember who the other quarterback was with Doug Johnson, or was it Doug Johnson and Rex Grossman? Is that who it was? Remember, he went through that stretch where he just rotate quarterbacks like almost every other series. Sometimes
weird. You can't do that.
I don't want to do that because quarterbacks have to get into some kind of rhythm. But as long as Tyler Buckner, see, here's the mistake they made last year. There were times in the game where they went with Tyler to give him a spark. And I don't know if that works because then that hurts your starter.
Right.
I think what you need to do is you need to have a defined role that Sam and Tyler both know is when we go here, Tyler's coming in the game.
Right.
And, hey, we get into the 10 inside the 10-yard line, Tyler's coming in. That's our package. Tyler's coming in.
Right.
We have a third down package on third and short that we're going to do with Tyler and something, or there's something like that. And then the other thing I would do is, as I tell Sam, like anytime we're up big late in the third quarter, we're going to put Tyler in to give him a couple series with the ones. You're our guy, but we're trying to develop this kid, and if something happens to you, we need to make sure that he's ready to play. But it's communicated and very clear and set out. And I think the thing that hurt them last year was the fact they didn't have that.
Right.
It just was kind of like feel. And I don't think you can do that with a quarterback because I think that hurt Jack from getting into a rhythm. Now, as the season wore on and Jack kind of had more clue of, hey, Tyler's going in this next series, it was a game plan that way. Tyler'd come in, play well, and then Jack would come back in and he'd play well because it was defined.
Understood. It was defined.
This is what's going to happen.
Do you feel like that season helped them understand how to define that moving forward?
I would hope so. I would hope so.
Okay.
Like it's got to be a very clear, this is what we're doing.
Right.
Tyler's getting the fourth series of this game, at least to start.
Sure.
And, that's what we're going to do. And then you can always kind of, hey, look, something happened and you need to make sure you roll with Sam again, but you don't ever just randomly throw Tyler in there.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Right. I agree with that.
And they had to do that to a degree in 2021, though, because they couldn't run the football, and they still Where offense is doing nothing because we can't run the football.
Right.
So we got to put Tyler in to give us a spark.
To even run the football at all,
They
to have
don't
any
need that.
semblance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with
They
that.
don't need that
right.
in next year's. If
Right.
that's a problem next year, something really bad has happened.
Yes. Absolutely agree with that part.
Yeah.
John Bertucci with a super sticker. Thanks, John. Really appreciate that. And then we've got a super chat from Chief Brody. Thank you, Chief. BKPTSD kicking in, where I'm now excited about offense, but now I'm nervous about the defense.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair. I appreciate that, Chief. We'll see what happens.
That. But again, nervous about the defense. If the defense repeats what it did this year, it's still better than teams that have won a championship in recent years.
Yeah, that is true.
It's still better than what LSU's 2019 defense was.
Sure.
Right? I mean, so at least not, I shouldn't say won a championship because that's not accurate. Other than the 19 LSU team, I don't think it's better than like 2020 Bama, which didn't have a great defense. But it's good. It's as good as teams that have been in the playoff
and it's
in championship game.
Like
correct.
TCU has the 58th scoring defense in the country.
Correct.
Notre Dame's defense is better than TCU's.
Right. It's better than the 2020 Ohio State defense.
Right.
That went to the championship game.
Right.
Right. Yes. Correct.
So yeah.
But
agreed.
Why couldn't they win a title? Because they didn't have very good defense.
Because they have good defense. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Exactly. ICURN with Irish Luck. I believe that's the third super chat of the day. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that very much.
Very much.
Very
so.
much.
Seems like we have a lot of familiar or similar skill sets in the quarterback room. Hartman, Minchie, Carr coming in. Quick release, nice touch. Not cannons for arms, but good arms with good anticipation.
Yes. I don't think any of them have cannons, but I think CJ Carr's arm strength is very underrated by Notre Dame fans. Very underrated. I think he's got a pretty strong arm. Vince, you and I saw him spin it in person, and that ball jumps out of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is I've heard people say, well, he's a year older than other people. So I don't care how old you are. I care about how old your body is. And what I mean by that is, Vince, you know this. You've met your son's a freshman or sophomore?
Sophomore, yeah.
Sophomore. There are kids in this class that look really young like he does.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kids in this class that look like they're driving another student to school because it's their child.
Correct.
Right? Like we both have been there. Like it's funny, I had a kid on my junior high, like my middle school basketball team, played against him when, in 5th and 6th grade, and then we were on the same team in 7th and 8th grade. His name was CJ Noble, and he was our center. He was like over 6 feet tall. Like he had he could grow a beard. He had like very hairy legs. This is in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. By the time he was a senior, now I moved away from Bath after the 8th grade. But when I came back my senior year at one point in time for Christmas or Thanksgiving or family, something like that, he was playing shooting guard because he didn't grow an inch in high school.
Yeah.
And his game had to evolve because he was still 6'1" and, looked exactly the same, and his game evolved because he just grew up quicker, and that's the reality of it. CJ, as you and I saw this summer, he looks very young.
Yes, he does.
His body looks very young.
Mm-hmm.
He may be a year older than other people. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but he's got a very young physique, which means he's going to get a lot bigger and stronger. And we started to see that a little bit as a junior. You started to see that jump a little bit. And I think he's going to make another one next year. And he's going to be really good. He's going to be really good.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about that. Okay. Calm down. Kind of like that one. Calm down is the name there. Does Kenny Minchie now walking into a top quarterback room help his development more than walking into a less experienced one and getting more early game time potentially?
I think it's good for him to play behind veteran players. I still think quarterback, with the exception of the great ones, is still a position where there's a lot of value to learning from people that can show you how to do it a certain way.
Right.
And I mean, you've heard Tom Brady talk about how invaluable the time he spent behind Drew Bledsoe was.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't long,
but
having Drew Bledsoe there, and then Drew did a great job that year as when he was hurt of kind of being there for Tom. Right. I think those things are invaluable to have that kind of guy that can show you, hey, son, here's how you go about your business every day.
Yep.
Here's how you prepare every day.
Absolutely.
Here's how you attack the weight room. Here's how you watch film. Because coaches can only spend so much time with you.
Yeah.
But if you've got a good leader, a quarterback, and you're a sponge, man, you can learn a ton.
I agree.
Now, nothing beats playing experience, but I think sometimes playing experience at too early of an age can be a hindrance to players where they lose their confidence because they get their brains beat in.
Right.
And so, like, people say, well, if Tyler Buchner would have just started all year last year, he'd be so much further ahead. I don't know about that. Number one, he may have suffered another injury. Number two, is he necessarily going to be better by getting his face bashed in the whole season with behind that offensive line? I don't think so. Go look at David Carr or Derek Carr.
Derek.
I still believe if Derek Carr would have gone somewhere other than the Texans, he would have had a much different looking NFL career.
Yeah. Now he holds the NFL record for most sacks.
Yes.
Like, I mean,
he wasn't like, late third down. He was getting crushed.
Just hammered. I mean,
so I think that can have a negative impact on a guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so I still believe there's a lot of value in coming in and learning.
I do too. 99 problems, but BK ain't one. We got a tour here. So
two-parter, huh?
Yep. Given his injury history, is there unknown risk if Tyler Buchner won the QB competition and then got hurt? The potential risk being Hartman leaves before the season starts if he lost the job. I don't see that happening, by the way, but just another wrinkle in the risk reward of real competition. I have to think even a close competition leads to Hartman being the starter.
As it should.
He's got more experience. He should get the nod if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Buchner has to be better.
Yes.
Because there's so much unknown with him.
Right.
That's the reality of it.
Now, with the rules, if he's here for spring semester, goes through spring practice, and let's say Tyler Buchner is named the starter, which I don't see there being naming a starter at the end of spring practice, but I'm just, for this situation, can Hartman then transfer to another school and still be eligible right away?
Right.
He can?
No.
So once Hartman enrolls at Notre Dame, he's stuck.
Well, no, he could. I mean, he could. Because he's a graduate. He's a graduate. So yeah, he could. It just it wouldn't be good. It would be tough for him.
All right.
He could.
Oh, absolutely.
Can I bring some up real quick, Vince?
Yeah.
It's like Johnny S says, the phrase is if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Lou Holtz. Look, I get this expression, but people keep using this as some kind of absolute.
Right. It's not.
There's so many instances I could point to where that's just not accurate. You're missing the point of what he's trying to say. The point is what he's trying to say is if you have two quarterbacks because nobody just kind of stepped up and said, I'm the guy, then you don't have any quarterbacks. Right.
Completely agree.
There's clearly times when Lou Holtz in 1993 played two quarterbacks. Ever heard of Paul Fela? I mean, he didn't just play when Kevin McDougal got hurt. He came in and was part of that. They did that T formation thing and play him. He found a role for him. Right. So I'm not a fan of it. I think you need to be careful how you use it, but there's certainly a time and a place where getting two quarterbacks involved is a good thing. And you can have two quarterbacks and still say only one's going to be your starter. I mean, that's part of it too, right? I mean, Alabama had two pretty darn good quarterbacks in 2019. Tua Tagovailoa and Mac Jones. Only one of them was starter. Still had two quarterbacks, right? So phrases like that where you use it with indiscretion, isn't fruitful, in my opinion.
Timeout. Tom says competition is good at football, except at quarterback. The quarterback has developed confidence and grow his status as the centerpiece of the team. He needs to be a leader and foster a relationship with receivers.
Well, let me tell you something right now. I understand where he's coming from. But one of the things that can really tear a locker room apart is when when people feel a quarterback's been given a job. Players earn a great deal of respect from a quarterback when they watch him battle.
Yep.
Now, to Tom's point, I don't want the quarterback battle going into the week before the Navy game. I've said that this year with Drew. And look, Tyler's the guy, make him the guy.
Yep.
Right? So don't unnecessarily prolong that battle. The only way I want it going down to Navy is if it's just that close. And, I don't know if that's a good thing, to be honest with you. But you gain respect from your teammates by battling and winning a battle. Hey, I watched this guy outplay Tyler Buchner, who I know is really good. Or I watched this guy outplay Sam Hartman, who's really good. I think that only adds respect to them, to be honest with you, because they won that battle. Because everybody else has to win that battle.
Right.
And so that can fracture a locker room because let's just say they walked in and say, Sam, you're the guy. Sorry, Tyler. What's that going to say to the rest of the team, right? Like, who has faith in Tyler Buchner? Like, Why doesn't he have to compete like I have to compete?
Right.
Why does he get handed a job and I gotta compete against this guy? That's not fair. So you got to make him earn it. Because here's the thing: if he can't beat out Tyler Buckner, then guess what? He's not going to help you be a better football team. And so now again, there has to come a point in time where he becomes the face of the program. 100% agree. There has to come a point in time, sooner the better, where he's the one working with the ones. But in this day and age of summer school and all these other things that players do where they're around each other all the time, trust me, they're getting plenty of reps with the wide receivers and fostering a relationship. There's no question about that. So I understand where Tom's coming from, but I can't go there to that degree.
All right.
I'm getting a lot of questions from people about the portal. We have updates on the portal kids and who they're after and where things stand on the message board. So I'm just, if you want to know that, check out the message board.
Yeah, that's easy. All right, this will be an interesting one. Brian and Vince, if you were given truth serum, do you think that Tyler Buckner is good enough and accurate enough to beat out Sam Hartman?
Okay, so I wanted to respond to this one, Vince, because my question is this, or my response is, I really, really dislike when people, and I love Robert Bishop, he's a great commenter on our chat, but I really dislike premises like this. It's like you say, now, if you're being honest, I'm always honest.
Right.
I may be wrong, but I'm always honest. And if I don't want to tell you what I think, I won't say anything.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm always going to be honest with you. So if I didn't think Tyler Buckner had a chance in heck at beating out Sam Hartman, I'd have said that at the very beginning of the show. And if every coach at Notre Dame texted me and said, hey, you need to make sure that you're telling people that this is a legitimate battle because they don't want Tyler to leave, and I didn't believe that, I wouldn't say it. I don't work for them. They don't pay me anything.
Right.
Right? And so I would tell you, do I think Tyler Buckner's good enough to beat out Sam Hartman? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The second part of that question is going to determine if he can actually do it or not.
Correct.
Can he be accurate and good enough with his mechanics every snap to be that guy? That's going to be the question, Robert. Because the most talented quarterback on the roster next year is going to be just physical talent. It's Tyler Buckner.
Yes.
The second most physically gifted quarterback on the roster next year is going to be Kenny Minchie. Right? Yeah. That's not why Sam Hartman's a great quarterback, though.
Right.
Or at least potentially so. It's the other stuff that goes into being a quarterback. It's not always the physical talent. Tom Brady clearly did not have the most physical talent of quarterbacks of all time. He's never in top 10. But most people think he's the greatest quarterback of all time because the results.
Mm-hmm.
And quarterback is unlike quarterback and O-line are unlike most other positions where there's a level of just really freaky athletic skills needed. We've seen some offensive linemen not be freaky athletes that are really freaking good, right?
Absolutely.
Quarterback's the same way. You don't see that at running back.
Right.
You don't see that at receiver.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's a position where if Tyler can prove to be accurate and be a good decision maker and be more consistent, then he's going to be tough to keep off the field.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the issue. The mechanics that lead to that is the issue.
Yep. Got a few more here. We got a super chat here from Milton Fan. He says, does the D get a bad rap due to poor offensive play?
No. I mean, your question assumes that we don't know the difference between the defense struggling because they're being put in bad positions.
Right.
And I think that's a false assumption. Like we have said in the past, like we have talked about how the offense wasn't as good as its numbers showed because of the position it was put in by the defense or special teams, right? Syracuse game. Remember this, Vince, where we talked about like the offense didn't score 41 points.
Right.
A, they had a pick six. B, they had another series where a blocked punt gave them the ball at the 2-yard line. Right. Okay, so like they didn't have a great offensive performance. So I think this is a good question, Milton Fan. I think it's a very fair question, but like we can understand defense actually did a good job on that series, but they gave up those points because the other team got the ball at the 7.
Right.
Or they got a field goal because they got the ball at the 25, right? We can tell the difference there. The defense didn't play well because the defense is getting the rap it's getting because it did not play well. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got to play better. Right. And the offense has had bad years before, and the defense didn't play like it did this year. And so I don't think that's I just don't think that's necessarily a something that I would say. And like I'll say this, Vince, Notre Dame ranked 35th in the country in total plays on defense, just higher than you want to be, real if we're being honest about it. But part of that, Vince, is their own fault. You ranked 50th in the country in third down defense.
All right, couldn't get off the field.
You couldn't force turnovers, right? Like where did they rank in turnovers gained? They were not very high. They ranked 98th in turnovers gained.
That's terrible.
That's not on the offense.
No.
You being 50th in the country in third down defense, you being 98th in the country in turnovers forced has nothing to do with the offense.
Right.
So, now were the points higher because of the offense? Yes. They had 4 pick sixes this year? Right? Something like that. Tyler had 3, 1 against Marshall, 2 against South Carolina. There was another one. Didn't Drew have one, Vince, or am I misremembering?
I think he did, but I couldn't tell you where when it was.
Yeah. So that's kind of opponents had 3, so Drew did not. Was there a fumble return for a touchdown? No. Let's see here. Notre Dame only had 1 fumble return this year. Good Lord. Yeah. So point is like there were times where the defense was put in some pretty bad spots, but 21 points this year came off of the defense or off the offense. So yeah, the points per game, but we don't obsess over they stink because they gave up X number of points per game. It was they didn't play as well because this is what they were not good at. They were literally the second worst red zone defense the entire season.
Right.
You want to keep your points down? Don't let teams convert like 90% of their red zone possessions into touchdowns.
Right.
Pretty simple solution. It was 79.4. 27 of the opponent's 34 red zone opportunities resulted in touchdowns. That's not on the offense.
No.
It's just, let's go see where that ended up ranking at the end of the season, Vince. 131st, literally ranked dead last in college football. Dead last. So that's not on the offense. It's not on the offense. It's on you.
Yep.
So yeah, that's bad, man. Good Lord. The
Done.
only team that finished worse than them overall in the red zone was Rutgers. Now, here's what the defense was good at. They ranked 11th in the country in fewest red zone trips allowed. It's pretty good. But you've got to make stops once you get in there.
Once you get in there, that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We got a couple more here. Irish Mills 540. Do you think this year is Tommy's test with an elite quarterback who can count on to fully run his offense? And what does this mean moving forward offensively? Will we see the same play calls, etc.?
No, you're not going to see this offense look like it did. You're going to see this offense look more like it did 2020 from Clemson to the end of the regular season. Last year, it stretches during the season last year to a degree. Look, I'll put it like this. If Tommy Rees, if I could kind of say, hey, here's what I think the ideal Tommy Rees offense is going to look like. It's a 500 yard per game offense, which this year would have put him in the top 5 nationally in total offense. Last year would have put him in the top 4 in total offense. So let's say they're a 500 yard per game offense. They're going to pass for 275 and rush for 225. That's what it would be, right? That's not what it was this year, Vince. It would look a lot closer to what we saw in the bowl game, though, right? 250-ish to 250-ish kind of thing. But, those are the things that I look at and I say, man, if they're clicking the way they want to be a 200 to 250 offense, meaning 200 rushing, 250 passing is the minimum of where they want to be.
I agree.
And with a little bit more explosiveness, because 450, that would put him at 30th this year, Vince, which is pretty good, pretty good. But, then kind of maybe a little bit more, maybe it's like 225, 250. That puts him up to around 275. That gets him all the way up to 13th. There you go. That's pretty good because the 2 teams playing in the college football championship this year are ranked 13th in yards and 8th in yards. The other 2 playoff teams ranked 9th and 25th, right? So you've got to be somewhere up there, right? And, yeah, that's kind of how I see it, Vince.
All righty. The super chats keep coming in. So AJ Boggs, thank you very much for the super sticker. Really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
We're only going to
Let's
do,
see here.
I got to get rolling, Vince. So
Yeah,
we're
well,
going to
there's another
just
show
finish
here
up
in
with
18
yeah,
minutes. So yeah,
right. We're going to
Paul-
finish up here with super chats. Yeah.
This is an easy one. It's quick. Is
Yeah.
Hartman's transfer immediate, or does he wait until the summer? It's immediate. He'll be here in the spring.
Yes. Yep.
Gregory,
I do
thank
want
you
to
for
answer the one non-super chat that's in there, Vince. You'll see why.
Okay. Sounds good. Gregory Gilbert, thank you very much for the super chat. After hearing Hartman to Notre Dame, I went and looked at his highlights, and not only did he throw a good deep ball, he also had zip on slants and put the ball in tight cover. Can't wait for next season to start.
I had somebody on the message board, or was it in this chat, that said that Grayson McCall had a better arm than Sam Hartman. I'm like, no. Now, I think Ian Book had a little bit more zip than Sam Hartman did, but not by a ton.
Not as accurate.
Ian Book threw a pretty deep ball. He just wouldn't throw it.
Yeah,
that was the problem. It was not ability; it's just he wouldn't do it. And Sam Hartman will not have that problem at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I can assure you of
that. Julian, do y'all sell shirts or anything? I love you guys. Yes, right here,
below,
baby.
Yeah, this is this shirt right here is for sale. That shirt's for sale. Vince is the pullover. Vince, I have the navy blue one, which I've worn on the show before. We have all types of hats. Got all these type of hats available in the store. Got the green one. Also have green with gold. This is the flex fit, right? This is also a flex fit. Got gray, got white. Vince wears the white one a lot. So
it's right here,
man,
actually.
The gear. Well, I gotta have my hats here ready for the show. So that's one of my New Year's resolutions is to mix up my hat usage.
But t-shirts, sweatpants, hoodies, all of it, it's all there and it's all awesome. So definitely check it out.
Got the IB mug that I drink my tea out of. So man, all types
of
stuff.
All right, Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you very much, Tyler.
Link is below, by the way. It's in the in the chat or in the box below. You can get the link to our merch store.
Yep. Is this year the best bowl season and your favorite top 3 bowl games this year, in your opinion? Goodness, I didn't watch a ton of bowl games.
Oh man, there's been so many great bowl games. I mean, yes, I said this in my midweek musings yesterday, Vince. It's like, don't tell me that these games don't matter to these kids. Did you watch the Arkansas-Kansas game? Did that look like they didn't care?
Right.
Did you watch Tulane against USC? Did Tulane and USC, those two teams, look like they didn't care?
That was a good one
to be there?
Both semifinal games were good.
Well, no one says that kids don't care about being in the playoff. It's the other bowl.
No. I'm just saying, based on this,
right? Well, I'm making a different point. Like what they'll say is, you're correct. The playoff games have been awful. They were really good this year. But my point is, people say, "Oh, bowl games don't matter." I watched a bunch of bowl games this year, and I did not see a bunch of kids that didn't want to be there, or coaches that didn't want to be there. It may not matter to you. It may not matter to ESPN, because I've said this to my dad. I think ESPN is like it. I'm trying to come to grips with why is the network that covers bowl games. Why do they do so much to diminish the importance of those bowl games? It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
Right.
Because I don't think they want to keep paying for them.
Right.
I think they want the bowl games to go away because they don't have to pay for them, because their business model is collapsing. Right. That's what I think is going on. It's like just one less thing they got to spend money on. So hey, let's talk it down so maybe they get away with them. And then we can convert them all to playoff games, which people will watch. It's about money.
Yeah, exactly.
But don't tell me those kids don't tell me those South Carolina and Notre Dame kids didn't want to be there and weren't playing their hearts out. Those kids battled their butts off, both teams. Same with UCLA Pitt. It's a great game.
Yeah.
Now, they're not always the cleanest games, because you see a lot more turnovers in bowl games because it's been a month.
But you have a month off. Yeah.
These kids are playing their butts off.
Right.
And there were even some of the games like with lesser teams or like that. Those kids are playing their butts off in front of 10,000 people, which is embarrassing. But just those kids wanted to be there. Yeah. Those kids wanted to be there, and that's what matters. And it pisses me off that ESPN spends so much time talking down those games that may not matter to them, but matter to these freaking kids. Well, people only care about the playoff games. No, you only care about the playoff games.
Right.
Because that's what you're making money off of. Don't project on everybody else, but there's so many people that buy that crap. Mm-hmm. Bowl games don't matter. To who? Well, me. Why? Have you always been this way? No. Because you're allowing yourself to be manipulated by ESPN. If you never cared about bowl games, then I'm cool with that. But if that's only a recent thing, that's you being manipulated. You're too easily persuaded by the constant drumbeat from people you think matter and whose opinions mean more that it doesn't matter because they don't want to have to keep paying for it. That's what I think.
Right. All right, last one from David. Thank you very much for the super chat. I get the upside of Tyler Buckner, but would you agree Sam is a better fit for this offense? Quick trigger, use a lot of play action. If so, isn't it best if Tyler transfers?
No.
It's not best.
I don't agree that he's a better fit. I think that Tommy Rees would not like Tyler Buckner as much as he likes Tyler Buckner if he didn't think he could fit the offense. Because the thing for Notre Dame, what I don't think a lot of fans recognize that Notre Dame coaches realize is they think Tyler Buckner can be a really effective pocket passer. But you've seen it in practices before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've heard from some people that were at the bowl practices that this was the most comfortable he looked from the pocket.
Agreed.
It's just that, but he also brings that other element, that playmaker element that they haven't had before. But I think Tommy Rees wants it. Otherwise, why would they have made the push to make him the starter for the bowl game? They didn't just tell Drew, because people keep saying that Drew left because of the portal thing. It wasn't just that. He was also told that as long as Tyler was healthy, he was going to start in the bowl game.
Right.
And so why? Drew Pine's a better fit for what people think Tommy Rees's offense is about. I think Tommy Rees wants to play. Why did he love Ian Book so much? Because Ian Book would freelance a little bit. You know, he would make things off schedule. You need that a little bit in an offense. So it's definitely not best for Notre Dame the Tyler Buckner transfer at all. At all. And if they don't think Tyler Buckner's a good fit, then they definitely shouldn't have recruited CJ Carr, because CJ Carr makes a lot of stuff off platform or off schedule too.
Right.
So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, David. It's a fair thing to say. I think that Sam fits better what the offense has looked like at times, but I don't think that's necessarily where Tommy ultimately wants this offense to be. I think he wants a quarterback that can sit back and pick you apart in the pocket and then do the other stuff that Tyler can do.
Sure.
There aren't a lot of guys that can do that, but Tyler can, Kenny can, CJ can, and to a degree, Sam Hartman can.
Right.
To a degree. So he can make some of that stuff off script as well.
Yep.
So it's harder to do that when you're in the line on that slow mesh nonsense. So yeah, is that it, Vince? So hey, everybody, thank you so much for the show today. It was a ton of fun. Big news. Notre Dame gets Sam Hartman, and we've known about it for a while. I was just glad that it's finally official so I can stop asking, what's the latest with Sam Hartman? So that's great to know. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Make sure you check out our main website at irishbreakdown.com. Subscribe to the CFB Nation channel. And, of course, here in about 11 minutes, I expect all of you to transition over to IB Nation Sports Talk. Jesse Stiers and Sean Stiers are going to talk more about Tyler Buckner. They're going to give their opinions, or excuse me, Sam
They'll
Hartman.
Talk about Tyler Buckner too.
They'll give more of their opinions about Tyler Buckner and Sam Hartman and the quarterback thing. So if you want to continue this conversation about the quarterback stuff, head over to CFB Nation. The chat, the room's already available, so you can jump in now. The guys will get started around 6:00. Sean's pretty good about starting, that
close
early time. Something I want to get better at. Haven't been so far, but we'll work on it. We'll get there. But for Vince, I'm Brian. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your night. He and I will be back tomorrow, because you know what tomorrow is, Vince?
It's Mailbag Friday, baby. Free for all.
That's right. So last one that Vince and I get to do for a while. So we're going to have some fun tomorrow. So join us tomorrow, everybody, on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.